you're going to Then you're going to go to the breakout sessions where we will talk specifics about the two languages of your program. Those of you who provide support to a bilingual or dual language program, but you're not the dual language teacher, this could be some new information for you. But the breakout session is to make sure that all of us are very, very aware of how, well, we know how decoding works in English, but we're going to compare that to how it works in our partner language. And so we know that some part of what we do in the breakout session will be review, but we think it's an important step to take today, because you'll see why when we start to unpack culturally responsive books, so that we are developing literacy instruction around those books. One of the things that as dual language teachers we need to do is make cross-linguistic comparisons with the kids. And we won't be able to do that if, some part of us hasn't, fully digested what are the differences across the two languages. So we'll be modeling that for you. And even if it's review, I think it's very worthwhile review. Okay, then we'll talk a lot about text, and we're going to be talking about culturally responsive children's books in both languages. No matter what ELA program you use, we're expecting that some of the texts in your program, the way that you're delivering literacy instruction, that some of those texts at least are culturally responsive, but usually we have to add more. I can tell you that in Providence and throughout Rhode Island, they're all using really high quality literacy programs, and yet they do need to keep adding books to make sure it really represents the program well. Where we will end today is talking about how to take a single text, and I'll just be modeling this for you with a single text, but you can apply this to any text you work with. We'll talk about all the steps. I'm just clicking on them now because we're going to go through them thoroughly, that you have to take to plan the objectives for when you're teaching a book, to make sure that you are addressing all the goals of a bilingual or a dual language program. So we'll be saying a lot more about that. And the next time we see you, you will be in breakout rooms again, so that you can, I'm going to model this today in English, not because I favor English, but it's the common language for all of us. And then next time we're going to have you review some of this again, but with a native language text. So that's where we're going today, and we're going to end with resources for teachers. So I hope this feels like a good plan, and let's get started.
This meeting.
I do want you to know that this PowerPoints that we're showing you today will be in the same Google folder with the handouts and the resource article by tonight. And I will be making sure that they accurately reflect everything that we managed to do in the time we have available. And they'll be loaded for you, so you can relax. Unless you like taking notes when you're participating, you can just relax. It's all going to be there for you. It's a Saturday, right? So we're going to try to relax and have a good day. So where I want to begin with you is with a model. I think it's good, like even if it feels kind of foundational and some of this, I think it's really important to remember all the things that are involved with reading and what we must build in each language in order for our learners to become successful readers. And I really, really like this model. This is Hollis Scarborough's model of reading comprehension and or reading success, skilled reading. And you can see at the bottom are those word recognition things that we tend to do early on in the introduction of literacy in our two languages. They do need to know how to decode in English and in the partner language. And in some cases that involves recognition of characters or recognition of sight words. This is what we'll be going over in the breakout sessions. But it also involves all these things related to oral language comprehension. I can't read a text with vocabulary that means nothing to me and gain comprehension. We all know that.
Hi, Nancy.
Yep.
There seems to be an echo. Is your microphone too close to you or something?
Pretty far away, but I can turn the sound down.
Okay.
If anybody else have their microphone on, because that can create it.
Please, everybody else, mute yourself.
Let me go to my sound and I'll just turn my sound down. Does that help? Does
That's
that
fine. I
help?
don't hear an echo.
Yeah, you seem to be good now, Nancy.
Okay, so just talking about this again, all of this is necessary, and this is what we're going to be working on to make sure that everything is there to support our learners, because in order for them to become skilled readers, they need to have they need to be strategic as they attack text. All of this needs to be under their control. What they mean by literacy knowledge is the genre and knowing things about character setting and plot. And certainly they need to have a higher order thinking skills, but they also need, and this is what I'm stressing to you, the oral language base just really needs to be there for there to be comprehension. So we must have the vocabulary in place. This is where we do the front loading, right? But also it's more than words, it's also the language structures that they're going to encounter. So we don't want to forget about this, and that's why I'm having you look at this. And this is a handout that was in the handout folder, so I hope you're finding that. So now we're going to do a technique called a waterfall chat. And I'm going to ask you to think of a way, when you type your answer in the chat box, type it, but don't hit enter until I tell you to, all right? Because that way we'll have a waterfall effect where everybody's responses come in at the same time. So I hope I've explained that well. And what I would like you to do is to answer the question, in your mind, how does oral language affect reading and also writing? And what is one way that a child's oral language proficiency impacts their reading comprehension or their writing ability? So everybody go ahead and type your answer. Just one way that you know that oral language affects reading and writing, type it in the chat, but don't hit enter till I count to 3. Let me give you a minute to type your answer. Okay, and 1, 2, 3. So if one of the resource specialists could read some of what's in the chat box.
Hey, Maria,
Yes.
you have a good voice. Could you read it?
Yes, oral language benefits the understanding of how language works and provides context. Oral language impacts on decoding. Oral language infuses an emotional connection, aids comprehension, affects how we pronounce words. Oral language supports reading and writing. And oral language is important to reading and writing fluency. Another person said that students with well-developed vocabulary supports comprehension. Oral language helps organize our thoughts.
Perfect. Those are wonderful. I just want you to be really thinking about this, because what it means is when you're working on oral language, you are doing something extremely important to literacy. And it's more than vocabulary, and we'll be seeing that very clearly as we start to unpack text. So to add to what you've already said, and everything you put into the chat was fantastic input. Oral language lays the foundation that we need for children's reading and writing skills to develop. So when they're new to a language, if they're new to English or they're new to the partner language, they need to get some oral language under their belt before they start to work on reading and writing, or simultaneously with reading and writing. And we know that they can only be successful readers with high levels of comprehension. And of course, it leads to their sense of confidence as readers when we do a good job of developing their oral language before they tackle a text. And the challenge for us, those of you in the dual language programs where half of the kids are dominant in English and half of the kids are dominant in the partner language, is that you always have some people in front of you who are proficient and they have the oral language, and half of them in front of you don't have the oral language and you have to build it. So this is one of the things that we have to solve as dual language teachers. How are we going to work on this? Okay, so this comes from the Oisey Institute in Toronto. That's where Jim Cummins was based all the years that he was working. He's now retired. And why I wanted to show you this graphic is because if you look at the yellow boxes, those are the things we typically think of as reading skills that support reading comprehension. And yet, if you look on the blue panel, you can see that vocabulary and sentence structure and knowledge building and even acquiring the sounds. One of you said, you can't pronounce the language if you don't know. Like when you're reading, your fluency is impacted because you're struggling to pronounce a word if it's a new word and it's kind of a new symbol and a new sound. And yes, all of that is happening. So as dual language teachers, we know as bilingual teachers that we can't just work on the yellow panels. And that's typically what's in the programs that we work with. We also have to have a strong building of the oral language that kids need. So these are just reminders for you. And so the types of things that dual language learners need, if you look at that graphic, they need to have knowledge of certain content. I can't read a book about woodland animals for kids from the Caribbean if it's a northern woodland environment, or we're talking about Alaska, if they have no knowledge of that habitat, right? And so we do need to know what knowledge our kids have, what experiences they've had, what life experience they've had, what schooling experiences they've had, so we know how to frame a book. And then we also need knowledge as teachers of how the two languages work, the knowledge of phrase and sentence structure, and we need to impart that to the students and also help them understand how words and word structure works in the two languages. And this is what we're developing over time. And certainly the bottom-up skills are involved of characters, of radicals, of sounds, of letters, of symbols in the partner language and in English. But we have to make all of this work together, orchestrate all of this. So we need to tap their background knowledge, their funds of knowledge. That's why culturally responsive books are so wonderful for us. Or if it's a topic that they're learning about, because after all, they're in school to learn new things, then we have to build the knowledge about the topic before, during, and after reading. And I'm repeating things I know you know, but this is just to get us all thinking about this again. Then we need to develop their oral language skills, much bigger than vocabulary. Words are nice, but if they can't unpack structures that they're encountering in the text, if it's a complex sentence or a compound sentence and they're struggling to get through the sentence, that means we didn't get everything ready for them so that they would find it easier to make it through the text. And certainly we know as teachers that we need to work on their reading skills, like finding the main idea, and strategies such as taking a book walk or previewing a book, or other types of strategies that they'll learn to use. But we need to make sure they see how each language works and how they're alike in certain ways and how they're different. And this is something that mainstream teachers teaching only in English do not work on this, because it's not one of the goals of their programs, but it is for us. We have to make sure that we're helping the kids see how each language works. So now let's talk a minute about how we can, what are the ways that we know through the literature we can introduce reading in two languages. So one way we can, some of you are working in dual language programs. And I would only refer to dual language programs if where you have people where the objective is that to sustain them in the program, to fully develop their bilingualism, their biliteracy, and their biculturalism. So this is a program that has to last 4 to 6 years or more, hopefully go through middle school and high school. And in two-way immersion, where you have two groups of students, half of the kids come in knowing English, half of the kids come in, let's say, knowing Russian. And they're taught side by side. Many programs use a 50-50 model where they teach half the day in the partner language and half the day in English. But some programs do use a 90-10 model where when children enter the program in kindergarten or pre-K, you start 90% in the non-English language. And that might sound like, gee, how does that work? But actually the 90-10 programs have shown that kids develop better literacy in both languages, because English gets a lot of support outside of school. Now, another model of dual language programs is called developmental bilingual education. It too is a dual language program because the intention is to keep kids in the program over time, at least 4 to 6 years, hopefully throughout their schooling career. And this is when you only have heritage language speakers. But in some cases, like when I was working in El Paso, all of the students were Latino, and it was kind of crazy. They were calling half of the kids English dominant and half of the kids Spanish dominant, but in truth, all the kids knew some of both languages, and they should have referred to their program as a developmental bilingual education program, because all of the kids were of Spanish-speaking backgrounds, and all of the kids knew some Spanish. And it's a legitimate dual language program. It's just you're not mixing the heritage language speakers with English only speakers. It's a cohesive group that only includes heritage language speakers. Some of you might be working in such a program where you only have kids that are from the language background, the non-English language background. And another example I could give you is in Providence, we have a trilingual dual language school where one of the programs is Portuguese English. And most of the kids in that program are Brazilian or they're from the Azores, and there are hardly any English speakers in there. It really is a developmental bilingual education program. It's kids whose families want them to become fully bilingual, but biliterate in the heritage language of the home. So I hope I'm explaining this well. And this is review, I'm sure, for most of you. The other type of program is a TBE, or transitional bilingual program, where the kids are not supposed to be in that program for more than 3 years. You start using a lot of native language at the beginning, but over time you wean it down to that little point at the end where you're hardly using any native language, and out they go. So this program does not intend to maintain their bilingualism or their biliteracy. It uses it for a time to give support for the content learning and to strengthen their literacy development in their mother tongue, but then they're out of there. And the only kids who would be in a TBE program are speakers of the language of the program. Now, I'm going through this for a particular reason, because I'm assuming that all of you are working with either a dual language program or a TBE program. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all understanding the difference between these. The one way you can introduce literacy is called sequential literacy instruction. And in this program, you start usually in kindergarten as children enter school, only introducing literacy in the children's home language or in the partner language. And at the same time, you develop oral English. And then after about a year or a year and a half, you then start introducing literacy in English. In other words, in this program, you're getting literacy off the ground in the language other than English. And who might use this arrangement? Well, the 90-10 might use this arrangement because we said they're going to start mostly in the partner language. And this is for both groups of kids, whether you speak English or whether you speak Spanish, let's say, everybody's going to start to learn to read in Spanish. And it's an advantage, by the way, because Spanish is perfectly regular, whereas we know English is not. A developmental bilingual education dual language program might also start this way because we want to strengthen children's literacy in their home language first, and then we're going to start to introduce English. We're not going to wait long, and we are going to develop oral English ahead of time, but we're not going to have formal literacy instruction until about a year of time learning to read in the home language or in the partner language in the case of a 90-10 dual language program. And a TBE program would be doing this too, strengthening the children in their home language before starting literacy off the ground in English. And I do want to mention that for TBE, the kids could be coming in at any grade level. So that's the challenge of that program, because I'm not getting them all in kindergarten. I could be a TBE program and I'm 4th grade and I'm getting new kids all the time. But I might start by making sure that I'm really strengthening their home language and then slowly introducing English. It's not my only choice, right? But I'm hoping all of you are understanding in the sequential model, we start in one language while we're developing oral proficiency in English. And then after a time, then we start formal literacy instruction in English. And then they will have a lot to transfer from the home language over to English. Okay, so in TBE, the English could be phased in across any 3 grades. The other option is just, I have 2 periods of instruction, one for the partner language and one for English. And simultaneously, I'm introducing literacy in both languages right away. And the programs that might use this arrangement are the 50-50. I could decide to do this in a DBE program, developmental bilingual. And certainly I could decide to do this in a TBE program. I'm sorry I didn't list that. Now what we're going to do is take a poll to see what you actually are doing. And I hope that based on my explanation, all of you know whether you would consider your program a simultaneous or a sequential program. So we are going to ask you, does your program use a sequential approach to literacy in the 2 languages or a simultaneous one? And please answer our poll right now. I'm going to give you a minute, and then we'll see who's doing what. You just have to click on sequential or simultaneous. And then hit submit.
Does everyone see the poll?
Yeah, I think right now 65 out of 98 has answered.
Okay, so I'll give you 30 seconds. Okay, Antoine, go ahead and show us the results.
Okay, doke.
Okay, wow. So we have a really strong number of you that are doing simultaneous. This is very helpful for me about the slides that I'm about to show you. Thank you so much for answering. There's nothing wrong with either one of the models. They both can work, but you need to know which one you're doing. That's the important thing. Okay, so hang on to that detail in your mind.
The kids correct me.
Okay, and so now you might have to hit the close button, all of you, to see the slide that I'm showing you, to make sure that it's not in the middle of the screen and you're still seeing the poll. But the advantage of sequential is the language other than English gets strengthened when you start in that language first. There were programs in Rhode Island where most of the kids are in transitional bilingual programs where I was telling the superintendent, and she believed it, that they should start in pre-K and K only teaching kids in Spanish, because the kids' Spanish need to be strengthened before they went into English. And it really paid high dividends. So you could have a population where, you know, it's Head Start. It's like a Head Start mentality. Like they need to have their language strengthened before they go, as they go into literacy. But we know in the dual language programs that the more we use the non-English language, the better the outcomes in terms of how bilingual and biliterate the English speakers become and the other speakers as well. We also elevate the status of the language other than English. English has plenty of support. It doesn't need any support, but the other language needs respect, to be respected and valued. And so when we start first in the language other than English, we're saying these languages both matter, and English gets a lot of support, and we're going to give some more support to the other language. And language minority parents sometimes feel better because they're able to participate more fully in their child's literacy development. Now, what are the advantages of simultaneous? Well, for 50-50 programs, simultaneous literacy development mirrors your model. And it satisfies both groups of parents who sometimes express concern about whether or not their child is learning to read in English. Unfortunately, we get that sometimes, like, will my child learn to read in English? And so this sometimes satisfies both groups of parents. And it forces kids to sort out the differences between how decoding in their two languages works. And it permits students to use bilingual books earlier in the program. But there's always a way to use bilingual books, I want to say that, and do translanguaging. And there's always a way to express our valuing of both languages. And both approaches will allow you to develop metalinguistic awareness in your students. So these are the types of things that we will be working on as we develop literacy. And one of the things we really want kids in our program, in our dual language and bilingual programs to see, to start developing is meta-linguistic awareness. What does that mean? It means understanding how the two linguistic systems work. Oh, Russian does it like this, but Spanish does it like that. Oh, Haitian Creole uses this type of punctuation, but English only uses this kind of punctuation. We want them to understand those differences. That's why we're doing the breakout groups. And we know from research that bilinguals who learn about how their languages are similar and different achieve higher levels of academic achievement in both of their languages. And that's why we're stressing this today. One of the things they do in a bridging period, it's an actual instructional period where I help them engage in contrastive analysis, let's say between English and Spanish, English and Arabic, English and Russian, English and Haitian Creole, English and all of the languages of today, English and Chinese. We want them to understand those differences. And I'm going to show you examples in Spanish because that's our largest group today, but we're not forgetting about any of you. I want to promise you that. So you might have, if English and your language, your partner language share an alphabet, which is not the case for Arabic, which is not the case for Chinese, you want to show how letters in English function either the same or differently than the same letter in the partner language. So here we know that the H in Spanish is silent and Hernandez, hijo, etc. And that if we want to make a aspirated sound, we need to use a G or a J, jirafa, gema. And then happy, high, hungry, those are aspirated in English. So if we can show kids this difference, they start to go, I get it now, how the letters are different. Or down here, this I saw a lot. I was a bilingual teacher, a dual language teacher in San Francisco for 7 years. The kids had lots of concern, bumping up, the two languages bumping up around vowels. And if they can understand E, the E is made in Spanish with an I, but the E in English might be made with just an E, right? Or E consonant E, or EA, or EE, or IE. It's crazy in English, but we want to start to help them to see how their two languages work the same and different. And this is an actual program that Silvia Dortaduque de Reyes developed. It's published by Benchmark. I'm not trying to sell it to you at all because it's better if you do this within the program you're using, not as a separate kit. That's my opinion. She shows the kids how, with the same image, dolphin and delphine, and how the D works in both languages the same. But one of the things I didn't like was she added ED, the ending ED, and that's not true that it always functions as D, but because if you take something like, let's see, of course I can't come up with one right now, but it ends,
Light.
walked, thank you, walked. So the ED doesn't make a D sound with walked. And sometimes when there's a consonant ahead of ED, it makes an id sound like wanted. So I wouldn't put that ED on the card. If it were me, it's too confusing. But this one's good. This shows them that nest and nido, that in Spanish, you only do n one way, whereas in English, it might be an N, it might be a KN, it might be a GN. But you're getting the idea from this. And there's all kinds of other contrasts we could show them, how the two languages work. Here, I can show them a consonant digraph is possible in both languages, that's on the left. But in Spanish, I can't use it except in the middle of a word. I can't start a word. It's not a Germanic language. And then all of you know that speak Spanish, that C-I-O-N and T-I-O-N are the same. And so this is the type of thing we're trying to show them. And we can also show it at a sentence level. How do I say a sentence in Spanish? Where do I put the descriptive words in Spanish, and where do I put the descriptive words in English? And so I don't care about these examples. I'm just trying to show you this is the type of thing we're trying to show them. Or that in English, it's just the all the way down. Whereas in Spanish, we have to use el and la. And a native speaker wouldn't need to know that, but a non-native speaker might. And also they might say, I don't know, they might use he's and she's places where they wouldn't if they are native speakers. So this is where we're headed now. We're headed to breakout groups. I only gave you examples about Spanish. That's very unfair because we have 5 languages today. We're going to show you these differences that exist, some of these differences that pertain to reading in your 2 languages. If you speak Spanish, you're going to stay right where you are, and Maria Diaz and I will be working with you. You don't have to go anywhere. The rest of you, we're going to send you off to a breakout room. But before you go, I want to mention that there is a center in Illinois called the Center for Teaching for Biliteracy. And there are, because you're going to distance learning, I wanted to mention to you, they have free videos on there that you can watch about moving a dual language program to a distance learning platform. So you can come back to this PowerPoint and find that. And they also have a webinar that you can attend, Teaching for Biliteracy, if you'd like to do more on this. We want you to understand transfer for your program's 2 languages, because we know that there's positive transfer of literacy skills across your 2 languages, even when the writing system is different. So it happens even when they have very different writing systems like Chinese and like Arabic. And there's lots of other things that will transfer once they are readers. And we want to unpack that. One of the things that always transfers, if I am confident as a reader and I know I'm a good reader in the language that I start reading in, I will bring that to English. I will know I'm a good reader and I'm going to be able to do this. I will persist when text becomes difficult. I will expect to be successful. I like reading. I'm going to read more outside of school. So all those things I'm doing in one language, my interest in reading, this is something I can develop in one and it goes immediately to the other. Okay, so all of these habits or attitudes or affective dimensions, if I've got a strong little reader in one language, they're really going to go over to the other language well. So now I want you to think about, if I teach them skills in English, like finding the main idea, do you think that'll transfer or not? And what about strategies like rereading a passage when I'm not understanding? Do you think skills and strategies transfer or not? Just think it in your head. Okay, so these are some of the things that I listed under skills that I just know all of this would transfer. I don't need to reteach it. If they can interpret graphics, they can interpret graphics. And if they can do it with Chinese text, when they go to English, nobody's going to have to reteach them. They'll just need the words, that's all. And in terms of strategies, summarizing as I go, setting a purpose for reading, all of that's going to work. So I know a ton transfers. And but it also does depend on the 2 languages, right? A lot of the times, and actually there can be problems when they share an orthography, because then they think a letter is going to work a certain way and it doesn't in the other language. So some vocabulary may transfer, maybe not. Some word analysis like prefixes, suffixes may transfer, some may not. And we've seen reading skills transfer, and we've seen visual literacy skills transfer. So this is the type of thing we want to be aware of as teachers. And I don't want to belabor the point. I think all of you understand this, but we know that even when there's higher transfer because they share and orthography, then there are bumps in the road because the letters don't work the same all the time. And sometimes it's an advantage. The two languages are very different. It's easy to keep them apart. And yet there is still some transfer, even when the two languages are very, very different. And usually it's around those skills and strategies that we build in one language that go right away to the other. So we are going to now get into our breakout groups. Remember, if you're Spanish,
Actually, Nancy, do you want to run that poll?
yeah, I will in a second.
Okay.
So when you are going to go to a breakout room, but I want to keep reinforcing, you don't have to go anywhere if the two languages that you support are Spanish and English. But if it's Arabic, Haitian Creole, or Russian, we're going to send you to a breakout room. And before we send you, right now, we'd like you to do a poll telling us, how knowledgeable do you consider yourself on a 5-point scale about the differences between reading in Russian, let's say, and reading in English, or reading in Chinese and reading in English, or reading in Creole and reading in English. So please rate yourself as to how knowledgeable you consider yourself right now before you go to the breakout group about reading in the two languages of your program. And we're going to give you a minute. Okay, Antoine, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very, very much. This is very helpful to us. When you get into your breakout group, we will be checking with, in the lower incidence languages, we'll be checking with you again and just making sure that we hit the mark. But we think even if you're extremely knowledgeable, we will count on you to join in. It's a good refresher for all of us to make sure that we're really, really clear how literacy works in the two languages. And when you come back, we will rate ourselves again. And even if you're still feeling only somewhat knowledgeable, it's okay. That's why we put things into the resource folder for you so that you can learn more and more and more about your two languages. We want to help all of you know everything that you could possibly need to know about how the two languages function. And so for that reason, let me show you, when you go to the breakout rooms, you will be meeting with people that know the two languages or will support your knowledge of the two languages. And then when we will show you this again, when you come back from the breakout room, we'll be in the breakout room for 30 minutes. So that will mean till 10:20. And when you come back, we will post these emails again, but just know they're in the PowerPoint. You'll be able to get them. And if you're still feeling like you're struggling to understand the two languages, and this was not enough, we need to hear that because we want to support you. And we will do everything it takes to make sure that you feel fully supported. Okay, so we're going to release you now to your breakout rooms and see, we'll give you a minute or two to get there. And then we will end the breakout at 10:20. And the session is not over. You will be sent back to the main room. Okay, so don't think the day is over when the breakout room ends. The day is not over. You're coming back to me.
Hi, Nancy.
Yep.
So I just sent everybody who to their separate room, Chinese, Haitian, Russian, Arabic. I just want to ask, is anybody still here who wants to go to Chinese? Anybody?
Yes, yes. I want to go to Chinese.
Can I have your name, please?
Last name is you. Right now it shows admin because
Yeah,
I
that's the
couldn't.
thing. That's why we can.
Okay,
Hold on. Admin. So let me look for admin. Hold on. Yeah, it's good if you can.
I can go.
No, I have to send you in. So I have to find. Hold on. I need to find admin. Admin.
Antoine, could you send me to a Haitian?
Yeah, but let me,
Yeah.
well, Haitian for now, don't worry, because she has Jesse and, okay, hold on, I am having problems. Why can't I send? Oh yeah, I found admin, sorry. I just found admin. Chinese, right?
Yes.
And Zimara, you want to be in Haitian.
Yes, please. Thank
The
you.
reason it's taking me some time is that alphabetical, which is,
That's okay.
which is,
And hello, I'm sorry. Can I be put in Haitian Creole too?
can I have your name, please?
It should say Sabine J's iPhone.
Sabine J iPhone. Okay, let me look for Sabine. Yeah, that's why I didn't recognize your name.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Sabine, Haitian. I saw your name before, actually. Sabine. Sabine, I just saw it. Oh, there it is. Haitian, right?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry,
Anybody
could you
else?
send to Russian group, please?
What's your name?
Anna Kurovska.
And
Can you do that in the chat, Antoine, so I can start?
yeah, sure. Anna, could you send me your chat?
Yes, I'm sending right now.
Is that going to work or do you need to stay live for a minute?
I'm good. Actually, I'm good. Is this good? Is that anybody else want anything?
Can I be put in the Arabic? I
What's
do
your name?
Arabic and Spanish, yes.
What's your name?
Marcela,
Okay, I think we're good, Nancy. You can go.
You're good?
Yep.
I just sent you a text. This is kindergarten, Ronnie Stark. I need to be sent to a Russian group. Thank you.
Okay, so if everybody now could go on to mute that's still waiting to get to a room and just keep communicating with Antoine in the chat, that'll help me get started.
Yeah,
Thank you
can
so
start,
much.
Nancy.
Thank you so much. So if you can mute people and they can go in the chat, Antoine. All right, thank you, everyone. So now Maria and I are going to get started and we're going to share the presentation. And what we want to talk about is, I'm sorry. Is everyone okay? Okay, so we're going to talk about teaching letter sound correspondence across Spanish and English. And
See, just a second, just to let everybody know that during our 30 minutes together, the chat won't work.
oh,
So
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, please do not type anything in the chat during the breakout session because it goes to everyone no matter what room they're in. We will not be using the chat function till we get back in the main room with everyone.
If you have any questions, jot them down later on, like a parking lot. And when we have the entire group, we could probably address them, not during the session, but we could get back to you.
Yes, so when this ends, if you have any notes written down of things, questions you want to ask, you will be able to ask them once we all get back together as a full group, and Maria will be answering your questions while we start the third part of the day. Is that clear? So do go ahead and take down notes of questions you want to ask, because we won't be able to do it during the session because our time is limited, but we do want to answer your questions or hear your comments. So when we get back to the full group at the end of our 30 minutes, then you will be able to put those into the chat box and Maria will be corresponding with you. Okay, and all of us, you'll have our emails for after the morning. And that's another way you could go if your time is limited. So we want to understand what transfers without a problem from Spanish to English and English to Spanish. So we want to know what functions the same across our two languages. Then we want to be clear on what's unique in each language. And also we want to see what is very, very similar. For example, between Spanish and English, there are two sounds of G, go and giant. And what do you know? There's two sounds in Spanish, hard and soft, as in gato and gemelo. And likewise, there's two sounds of C in English and in Spanish. So in English, hard and soft, cat and cis. And in Spanish, canto, and centavo. Okay, so we do know that sometimes something it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. And then we really need to know what conflicts, because we must differentiate that across the languages. And we know a biggie for Spanish and English is vowels. As English has a very complex vowel system, as Maria is about to show you, and Spanish is fantastic. It just functions like clockwork every time, and these letters only make one sound. We love them. But now the kids are going to have to learn all those conflicts as they go into English, or if they're English speakers, they're going to have to understand the narrowing of vowel sounds that they will make when they're working in Spanish. So take it away, Maria.
Yes, okay. So all morning we've been talking about comparing English and Spanish because those are the languages of your dual language bilingual program. So clearly we'll see that in Spanish we have more letters. We have 27 letters and 24 phonemes in Spanish. Contrasted that with English, there's 26 letters, but look, 44 phonemes in English. And in Spanish, we like to think that our language is very phonetic. We have 5 sounds, a, e, I, o, u, and those are the sounds that are constant. Whereas in English, we have 15 vowel sounds, long, short vowels, etc., which makes it learning English a little bit more complex. English also has many more vowel and consonant digraphs, OU, OW, etc., as you can see from the slide. And in Spanish, both vowel digraphs are used, as in the words aula, AU, aire, AI, reina, tierra, radio, viuda, etc.
But one thing to add is they're diphthongs. You do hear both letters sound. One
Yes.
doesn't go away, as in OO in English, where it's just ooh, or ow, as in AW, right? So what's great about Spanish is you always hear the letters.
Yes. And the consonant blends in Spanish only will exist in the medial position of the word. And we'll see it contrasted to English, where they're double and triple consonants in the initial and final position of the words, as we see with these diagrams. And in Spanish, we have many, many accent marks. We call those diacritical marks in Spanish. Diéresis, the 2 marks above the U, the accent for C, the accent critical that if we don't put an accent on papa, we'll have either potato or father. Whereas in English, we don't have those diacritical symbols as part of our orthography.
And just to add, there are accents that we place on words in English, such as the noun and the verb combat. So if I say combat, you have to recognize it as a noun, and I'm putting the stress somewhere at the front of the word. But if I say combat, then it's a verb. And so we do have accents in English, it's just they're not marked. You have to learn it over time. Okay, so there's so many sounds and spellings of English, and you know this, but these things English is called a deep orthography because you're always wading around in English. And even graduate students and even myself, sometimes we don't know what letter to write or what combination of letters to write because there's so many ways. I could spell extremely if I was doing inventive spelling, so many ways in English. So we know this. English is just tough. So that's another reason why if we could start just in Spanish with everyone, they would already know quite a lot when they enter English, and then we could do all this sorting out. But the sorting out lasts a long time across the grades because of all these sounds in English. And when we said there were only 15 vowel sounds in English, that's omitting things like at the bottom here, the R-controlled vowels and the L-controlled vowels. We're omitting them when they say there's 15. Otherwise, some people claim there's as many as 21 vowel sounds if you put in the R-controlled vowels and so forth. You'll be able to come back to this slide. We were just trying to make the point, look at English. It's really a killer. And so one important difference, this is really important to convince all the people in the school where you work, because Spanish is a syllabic language. It should be taught in syllables. It is not a synthetic language like English. So we should be teaching piedra, roca, mama, papa, sopa, right? You've not o, right? And so it can be taught at the syllable level. And in fact, it should be taught at the syllable level because it's a syllabic language. Whereas English is a synthetic language, we have to sound out every letter. K, at, right? We're sounding out every letter. We're not doing it in syllables. The only time we do it as like kind of a chunk is if you teach it as onset and rhyme is not misspelled. Rhyme is what the reading specialists call the ending. So if I teach the ak rhyme, ak, etc., cool ak, then I'm teaching the ending as a chunk. And there are 37 phonograms in English that could be taught as onset and rhyme. So you can do that a bit in English. And I would encourage you to teach the phonograms in English because then the English and Spanish will make, they'll have even more parallels if you do that, rather than always doing it synthetically, sounding out each letter. But there's lots of other differences between Spanish and English, and you're aware of this: the position of words in sentences, the accentuation rules, recognizing punctuation, the fact that gender exists in Spanish and we have to match it. That's why the kids get all mixed up with the he, she's when they're talking to you. They're not sure how to do the he, she's in English. It's one of the things we work on. So another thing that Maria's already told you is Spanish has 27 letters, the Latin Roman script of English plus the ñ, and there's 24 phonemes, as she's already mentioned. And some of you might have learned the alphabet in Spanish so long ago that there were these letters included in the alphabet, the ch, the ly, the r, and the y. And you might be saying, what happened to them? And we're going to show you in a minute. K and W are in the Spanish alphabet, but only for borrowed and loan words. And for W words, there are hardly any. And English has 26 letters, 44 phonemes, and 15 vowel sounds. So what I'm trying to show you now, so far I've repeated what Maria already told you. The red letters function exactly the same. And the C and the G and the Y are quite similar. But all the ones that are white function differently, and the ñ is new. Okay, that's why it's in purple. So again, red means they function the same. White means they function differently. Black means they're borrowed letters. Ñ means it's an added letter that English doesn't have. C, G, and Y sometimes are kind of similar in the way they work. And I already shared that with you. So some of the ways that H and J and Q and X, are different in Spanish are shown to you in that box. So we know that X can be pronounced like the letter H, as in Javier, or like the letter S, as in Xiomara, right? And that has to do with word origin. And then the rest, I think you know, I'm not going to read it to you. The H is silent in Spanish, like hijo. And sometimes kids learning to write in Spanish, with Spanish being their native language, will omit the H. They don't know to write an H because they're not hearing it. So they might write hijo as I-J-O, right? So we want to make all of this clear to them. And we've already stressed how the vowels are fabulous in Spanish and not so fabulous in English. So now I'm going to play a video for you. What happened to che, ly, r, and y? I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll play just the part you need to hear.
Hola amigos, today we're going to
your research to learn real-world travel.
So if you don't know what we're talking about, what's this che, doble L, doble R? Don't even watch this video because we don't want to confuse you. But what happened was there used to be another version of the Spanish alphabet. That all changed. Can you tell us about it, Mai?
Well, actually, in 1994, the Real Academia de la Lengua Española decided that some letters were no longer going to be considered letters, such as che and doble L, doble R. Instead, they were just going to be considered dígrafos, which is a union of two letters that make just one sound. For example, in English, you have the TH sound, but that is not considered a letter. It's not in the alphabet. Well, in Spanish, in the Spanish alphabet, before we used to have letters like che, which is the C and H.
Like churro.
Like churro, for example, and che was considered a letter. But then they were like, wait a minute, this is not a letter, it's two letters, which make just one sound. So they just decided that they were no longer going to be in the alphabet. And ever since 1994, they started not including them in the new dictionaries. But somehow, when I went to elementary school, I learned the alphabet with che and doble L and doble R.
And in some of my first Spanish classes, I remember hearing these sounds as if they were part of the alphabet. But that was just when they were really actually starting to change, right?
Yes. And until 2010, that's when they decided to make it official everywhere in the world where Spanish is spoken. Che, doble L, doble R were no longer going to be part of the alphabet. I mean, we still use the letters C and H. We also use double R. They are just no longer in the alphabet.
Yeah, so in 1994, they made the decision to get rid of them as kind of letters in the alphabet, even though they were sounds.
Yes.
But in 2010, they said, this is it. Officially from now on, the new alphabet doesn't include these sounds in the alphabet. They're still sounds in the language, but you won't find them in the alphabet as CH for che. You'll just see them in churros.
Or carro, or llorar.
I think this actually makes a lot of sense. Why have sounds in an alphabet that are really just a combination of letters? We don't have TH in English in the alphabet. We use it all the time in sentences, in words, when we're speaking to one another, but it doesn't make sense to have that as a separate letter. So if you've seen our video about the alphabet, you...
Okay, so we're going to stop it there because you've gotten the main point. And at the bottom of this slide, you see another reference if you'd like to look at that. And you might wonder why I'm telling you this. Well, when you go online, if you're teaching young children or any child, and you want to play a video of the alphabet, many of those songs include che and elie and r as if they are letters because they were at one point. And so you need to be careful. The other thing you need to be careful of is using the ABC song from English to teach the letters in Spanish. I want to encourage you to use the song that you're about to hear from Jose Luis Orozco as if you're going to sing songs about the alphabet. And I do want to make this note that the letter names are not needed early on. They don't help with decoding, because if I'm going to say the letter name of H, I don't want a child to see that letter and say H and then try to pronounce a word like hijo. It's not going to help them, right? So sometimes we just want to teach symbol sound, not symbol letter name sound. Okay, now I'm getting very specific, but this is something to think about if you're an early grade teacher. So I'm not going to play all of Jose Luis Orozco's song, but I do want you to hear part of it. And if you are picking up ABC songs in Spanish, make sure you pick up ones that don't include those letters we just saw are no longer letters, and make sure that you don't pick one that uses the English ABC song to teach Spanish. This is a very young Jose Luis Orozco you're about to see.
El abecedario, the Spanish alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, Ñ, O, P, Q, R, S, T, el abecedario es mi buen amigo. La próxima vez cántalo conmigo.
Okay, and unfortunately, because of time, I'm not going to let you sing with him, but you get the drift, and isn't that lovely? And having two songs makes the two alphabets clear to kids, right? So make sure that you have two songs. It doesn't have to be his, but don't make it the same song in English and Spanish. Now, some of the things that I saw as errors in the writing of my kids was, it was my birthday, and this was something that someone wrote to me in Spanish, and they were unclear of how to make the Y sound. And so they weren't sure whether to use Elie or Y. And be chica and be grande is a big one. You know, they weren't sure whether to put B or V when she was telling me, well, I wasn't very good yesterday, but tomorrow I'll be good. And then down here, you can see that they weren't sure how to represent the S sound. And sometimes the kids would omit sounds if they didn't say them when they said these words, like they would say, Dios mío, or voy pa allá, or something like that. And then they weren't saying all the letters. So sometimes if in their oral language, they say something, there could be some doubts or insecurities or omissions that happen for Spanish speakers. And I'm sure all of you who are bilingual teachers have seen these, but this might be something that we need to make clear to other people working in the program if they're not aware of the common things that kids will do. So now Maria's going to take it over.
Hi, you're mute. We're not able to hear you.
Sorry, okay. Talk about transfer. We understand that if we have a strong L1, if your first language is strong, generally you can transfer to 2, or if the connections between both languages. The first comment that we want to make is about the use of cognates. Look at that, from 30 to 40% of the words in Spanish have a related meaning to English. So there is a very, very strong connection between Spanish and English, and use that. The alphabet in Spanish and English is a Roman alphabet. So the same way you represent an A in Spanish orthography, it's the same way that you will represent the letter in English. So it's the same alphabet and just makes it easier to transfer. Reading comprehension and readiness, those skills about predicting and locating information in pictures, story events, organizing, main ideas, classifying, all of those wonderful activities that you learn in your L1, guess what? You're going to be predicting and locating information and main idea in English or in the other language.
And
So
I wanted to, oh, sorry, Maria.
Oh, go.
I wanted to show you at the bottom that if you'd like to see the Common Core in Spanish, there is a link for that in San Diego County. They did create the Common Core for Spanish, if you'd like to see that. Okay, and so Maria, continue.
Yes, and that these notes that Nancy has included are not accidental, so please make sure that you look at them carefully because they're full of information for us. And then as we continue with the transfer, more reading strategies, activating prior knowledge, we know that is key. If the student knows what an iceberg looks like in their first language, it'll be easier to transfer that image to his second language. The analysis of words, we have root words in Spanish, well, we have root words in English, and we use prefixes in Spanish and suffixes in English. We have compound words. So all of these are very familiar and they're easy concepts to transfer. A book feature, a student learns how to do a book walk. They'll look at a table of contents. They know what a glossary is for. Look at the use of marginal gloss. Those are those sidebars in literature. When you look at a book, there's a sidebar that would alert the reader to something important. If a student knows how to do that in the L1, they're able to do that in their L2. They'll be able to read a chart. They'll be able to understand graphics and illustrations if they've done that already with their L1. And reference tools, certainly a dictionary, a thesaurus, bilingual glossaries, all of those are skills that if you have them in your first language, the transfer is that much more easier.
Okay, and what Maria has just gone over, why are we doing this to you? Many of you know this. This is like, you know this like the back of your hand. This is what you have to show your parents. They have to understand all the things that transfer between languages so that, they don't worry when you're working more in one language than the other. And when you could also use this for progress monitoring to see which of these things your kids are doing and which of these things your kids are not doing. So what I'm suggesting to you now is dual language progress monitoring is different than single language English progress monitoring. Don't just progress monitor in English. You need to progress monitor across both languages. And you need to make sure your parents are very, very, very aware of all the things that it doesn't matter what language you're doing it in, this kids are still getting the skills they need. Now, I wanted to mention one more thing because Fred Genesee, who I've had the privilege to work with from McGill University, who's a bilingual, early childhood bilingualism specialist, you may know his name. He talks about not just interlanguage spelling, that what kids will do sometimes is they use both the knowledge from both of their languages to spell something. And this we refer to as cross-lingual inventive spelling. They're using letters across the two languages that they know to try to produce an utterance that they'd like to say. So when you see I liked, that one is cross-modal. I don't have the word cross-modal up there, but the way they speak the word liked is the way they write it. But then cookies, the IS is cross-lingual inventive spelling. It's an interlanguage spelling. They're using the I from Spanish to make the E's in cookies. And same with Cooper, Cooper. Okay, and I went horseback riding, the writing, that's an inventive spelling, but it's from the way they say it. And also the U in first time and lizard, or eyes popped open. Sometimes it's coming from the way they speak the word to the way they write the word. Sometimes it's coming from letters they know to use in one language and they're trying to use them in the other and it doesn't work out. So we need to be able to label in kids' writing. This is for when you're doing writer's workshop. You need to understand these things that happen in dual language writing that never happen in monolingual writing. Okay, and now Maria's going to finish up for us and I'm going to show you a couple resources after she's done.
Okay. All right, so we're not going to summarize.
Hi, Nancy, I'm sorry. Maria, I'm sorry. Should we announce that they have about 5-10 minutes left?
5.
5 minutes?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so again, focusing between Spanish and English directionality is the same way as opposed to other languages when you have to get kids used to different directionality. So thankfully, between Spanish and English is the same. There is the orthography, again, the same alphabet. There are some new sounds between the languages. New linguistic concepts. One of the linguistic concepts is, again, with the gender. We pay more attention to the gender in Spanish than we do in English. The positioning of the words in sentences is something that has to be paid attention to. The didactical marks reminding students about using the accents and the diéresis and the ñes. And the word borrowing, making sure that they understand the concept of cognates, but that there are such a thing as false cognates across languages.
So, like for those of you that know Spanish, pregnant and embarazada, so if they use embarazada for embarrassed, it's not going to work out for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, you know this.
Yes. One of my favorites is éxito and exit. Totally different. Totally different. Okay, again, looking at decoding from English to Spanish is a compare and contrast. We read words from front to back, left to right is the same as we do in Spanish. We use the Roman alphabet. You know that we're repeating that, but you know that in Spanish we have the sounds. A synthetic language, whereas the letters represent sounds, whereas in Spanish it's more syllabic, we read in syllables, 26 letters as opposed to 27 letters. So clearly you'll see how decoding works comparing the English to the Spanish.
And we want you to have this list in your head. We didn't complete it. We want you to be thinking about these differences. Make sure that everyone working in the program understands these differences. And also where there's great similarities between the languages, we want parents to understand that. And so these are all the elements we could look at, right, across the languages. How does rhyming work? How does accent work? How do syllables work? How does sight work? Or is there such a thing as sight word? And so what we've loaded for you in the Resource Center, I took a chart that was developed by others, including NABE, National Association for Bilingual Education, and expanded upon it. And we created what you see in the middle of these literacy elements. Then we tell you how things work between Spanish and English. So this is like a summary chart for you, but this is what needs to be in your head. And so down here, I've shown you all the sources for this, but these are the types of things that anyone working in a dual language program must have this under their belt. They have to understand how all these important literacy elements work across the two languages. So I've also included a really wonderful article for you that was developed some while ago, but it's fantastic. And it's on how to build on the sound system of Spanish as you go into English. And then I also have a really old list of Spanish frequency word lists, because even though there's no such thing as sight word in Spanish, there are frequent words in Spanish. And so if you were to hunt for them by grade level, you would put in palabras de alta frecuencia, and then you would see, well, what words are very common at your grade level in Spanish. And that would be along the same line. It's not sight word exactly, but if these words can be instant, kids can just see también and read it, and they don't have to take it apart and decode it, that would be great. Or they don't have to say, let's say, amigo. They don't have to try to unpack it. They can just see it and say amigo. They just know it because they see it so much. Okay, so these things are in the resource folder too. So now we're going to wait for the other people to come back. If you need a little stretch, you can take it now. When Antoine puts us back into the main room, which he will do in another 4 minutes, you actually have 4 minutes by my calculation if you need a stretch. When he puts us back, then you can add comments into the chat box at that point. And you can also ask any questions that you're having. And just know when we get back to the main room, we'll be seeing if this little breakout session was in any way helpful to you to start to make some of these differences very, very clearly stated, so that you, and a resource for you that you can go back to this PowerPoint and you can go back to the resource articles anytime you want to kind of be sure that you have all the clarity that you need to be able to defend the notion of transfer. Because anything that you do in one language, chances are high, there's going to be some good transfer to the other. Okay, so I'll be quiet so you can take a little stretch. Maria, you want to say anything?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Looking forward to continuing.
The tropes and the radicals of the written words need to be introduced first. My suggestion. Okay.
So she's sharing, that's the Chinese session coming back to us.
Okay, introduce with Pinyin. The text stories and lessons should
Does
be.
she realize that it's over? Do you realize it's over?
I know, but
No
I
more
have
talking, main room.
Okay, I'm getting back. Okay.
It is Nancy Cloud now.
Actually, you have a few minutes, like 3 or 4 minutes to take a break.
Yes, everybody take like a
I'm
stretch.
going to just finish the last 2 sentences. So some
Well, they
suggestions-
kick me
No,
out,
we're leaving
so
you, Nancy. We're taking our break.
they kick us out.
Okay, the text stories and lessons should be conversational with pictures and illustrations that students are interested in. Oh my God, I can't even move anymore.
Nancy, let people take their breaks. 3 minutes,
Okay.
4 minutes break.
Okay, sure. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let me see. Can I get in? I'm getting back in.
You're in already.
You're
Nancy,
in.
I see you.
You are in. Leave the.
I have to get rid of my sharing, I think.
You stop already. I don't see it. You're okay, Nancy.
Okay, good. All right.
You're here now. Yeah.
Okay, good. Good experience.
Nancy Cloud, I just want to let you know everybody's back. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I'm
Ready.
not seeing that my right PowerPoint, Antoine. Let me just get out of here for a second. I must have done something wrong. Somebody still has their desktop on, Antoine. That's why I can't see my third PowerPoint. I'm seeing Clotilde on the share.
Okay, let me, oh, okay. Let me go back. Can you take me back?
You are already back, but you have to unshare. Stop sharing, Clotilde. But you know, the best thing, Clotilde, could you log out and then log back in? That's the best thing.
I'm still sharing?
Yeah, could you just log out and then log back in?
I will.
See if that helps, Nancy.
Okay. So I definitely have that third PowerPoint open, but I'm not seeing it. I just see Clotilde and your name, Antoine.
My name.
On desktop 1,
Okay, I see it, Nancy.
Мы можем это купить. Если ты хочешь купить этот телевизор, мы можем купить его. Вот. Мы вполне можем его купить, если ты хочешь его купить.
Just to let you know,
Can I make
Nancy,
an
on your
announcement?
desktop.
Please, Russian-speaking participants, one of you are not muted. We hear your home conversations. Please mute yourself.
That's Nancy, that's your desktop?
let me see.
Oh, I
Is
just-
Marina still doing her breakout?
I'm here.
Hi, Nancy. Nancy, I just saw your desktop. What happened? You were sharing something.
But what I'm sharing, it doesn't look right.
Oh, this is not what you want?
Not 1A. I want 1C, which I opened. All right, let me close out of 1A.
Yeah, the best thing is just open it up again. Could that be it? Yeah, that is 1C.
Okay.
Good.
You're good.
So is it being shared now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me start it.
Yeah, it was just hit minimize, I guess.
Oh, I see. Well, we're learning, aren't we?
Yep.
Okay, so is everybody seeing the slide using culturally responsive books?
Yes.
Okie doke. So now I forgot to check for the box for sound. Can you tell Antoine if the box is checked for sound? It should be.
Are you playing a video, Nancy?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so don't worry about it for now. When the video comes,
Okay,
you might have
so
to.
let's do the poll
Yeah.
and see if it helped to be in the breakout sessions on any level. This will be good feedback for all of us that really want to help you. And we'll see if we need to offer more support. So please answer again where do you see yourself now after the refresher? From 1 to 5. We'll give you 1 minute. Okay, show us the answers, Antoine. Great, it looks like a little bit up. And for those of you that are still feeling like, oh boy, it was overwhelming, we really, really want to help you. So for any of you, this is why the RBurn at NYU exists. to talk about all of the languages of the programs, that dual language and bilingual programs across New York State. And they really are there as your resource. So we are the people, we are the team that want to help you. Don't forget that we're available to answer any questions and to offer resources to you. And it is our goal to make sure that everyone working in a dual language or a bilingual program feels very, very super confident about the two languages of the program. Even when you don't speak it, just to have that basic understanding is what we're after. We don't expect that we're going to make you proficient in a language that you're not proficient in, but we do expect that we could share with you the differences linguistically between the two languages. So that was our goal from the last session, and we can see that we're not 100% there. So please know that we want you to reach out to us, and we do want to be a good support to you, okay? And some of the people that were extremely knowledgeable before they went in and also still extremely knowledgeable, they're around in New York City as well, and rely on them. There's a lot of experts available to support you. So I'm going to move on to thinking about using culturally responsive children's books in both languages. And why do we want to do that? Well, we would like to tap the background knowledge that some of our students bring to us. They have experience that the book represents. And if we use that book, it's going to feel really familiar to them. They have a lot of knowledge to support literacy and reading comprehension. And for the kids who don't have that background knowledge, they will get it if we use that book, okay? But a bigger reason, this is why I'm stressing so much today, that you need an excellent library for your program in both languages of culturally responsive children's books, is so that you can meet the absolutely non-negotiable goal of cross-cultural learning. Now, I look at a lot of programs and I speak to a lot of people implementing dual language programs, and I would tell you, this is the poor little missing in action, non-negotiable goal of a dual language program. We're supposed to make sure that every child passing through that program develops cross-cultural competence, not just bilingualism and biliteracy. They're supposed to be able to function very well in both cultural environments. And they're also supposed to be learning about these different environments and how they work and what goes on in different linguistic communities. So it is an absolute non-negotiable goal of our programs to give all children in the program cross-cultural competence. And for the kids that come in knowing one culture, we want them to start to understand the other so they can function effectively in it. And this connects to Rudine Sims Bishop, long ago mentioned that books can be mirrors or books can be windows. That little girl on the left, when she reads a book, sometimes the book feels very familiar to her and she feels like, oh, that little girl is just like me. And she's having experiences just like me. That's the mirror book. But on the right are the window books. And which one do you think is more plentiful in schools? So it's the window. It's not the mirror. And so you need to be asking yourself, what's the balance of mirrors and windows like in my collection, whether it's a book room at my school, it's my own classroom library, it's a collection that we keep in the school library. And now we have to think, well, what can I find online, right? Now, great, there's books at school, but we're not at school. And so what are we going to find online? But the point of this slide was to remind me to tell you about Jane Fleming. She is the director of literacy in Chicago Public Schools. I lived in Chicago area for 6 years and worked with Chicago Public Schools. And let me tell you, it's as diverse as New York City and has languages in large numbers that you may not have in New York City, such as, I'm sure Polish exists in New York City, but let me tell you, Polish really exists in Chicago. And a lot of dual language programs are Polish and English. And so Jane's very familiar with who the kids are in the classrooms in Chicago Public Schools. But she, knowing this work of Rudine Sims Bishop, because she's a literacy specialist, she wanted to study how important are the mirror books? And what she found was the mirror books are far more important to getting early literacy off the ground than the window books. That our classroom should be stocked with mirror books because they have more power than the window books. And I want you to think about that, okay? Just think about it. Why would that be so? She also, knowing a lot about reading, says that for novice readers and struggling readers, kids below grade level, if the words in the text and the language in the text structure and the schema that is tapped into by the book are quite familiar, then the mind is free to go to the higher order skills. So we need books that feel very, very comfortable to children, very, very affirming of their life experience so that they can relax. They know they're going to understand the story. And now we can work on these higher level skills that are the goals in teaching reading. Another person who's a theorist in the teaching of reading is Louise Rosenblatt. And Louise's theory is called the transactional theory. She's not the only one who believes that. And the transactional theorists actually believe that, yes, an author writes a book. Some book is in their head that they want to write. The book in their head gets put down in words, the text, and it may not be exactly what the author had in mind. They're trying their best to get that concept that they have in their head down into a text, but maybe it isn't getting there quite, everything that they intended. And then the reader who reads the text may take away something completely different. And they believe that meaning is actually created among all three of these major sources. The author meant something, they tried to get it in the text, the reader reads the text, and what do they walk away with? And what I would liken this to is when you go to see a movie, or now you're sitting watching Netflix with 4 other people. When the movie ends, you might say, oh, that part, the XYZ part of that movie, wasn't that fabulous? And you go, what? The other people go, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. Where was that? I didn't see that part. That's because this viewer of the movie took something completely different away from the same movie that you were all watching. That happens to all of us all the time. And so transactional theorists believe that who the reader is and what text you choose really matters. That if I can make the reader really connect with the text, and if I can find authors who write texts that really connect with the readers, they will the meaning will come into focus, that all of these will be in harmony. Okay, so I hope I'm explaining that well. So we need a lot of culturally relevant literature in our programs. Why? Because it promotes learner engagement. It promotes interest in books. When I see someone on the cover that looks and feels like me, and I start to get in the story and it looks and feels like me in my world, I have a lot of interest then in books. And I feel more motivated to read, and I might read more frequently, and my family might enjoy the book. Even if the book is in English, when they see those pictures, they start to tell stories like, look at this scene back here. This is not suburbia, right? And this, you know, we could make guesses about what we think might go on in the story, and we might get more engaged. And it also reinforces a positive academic self-concept, and it activates prior knowledge. All of these things are working in my favor when I'm trying to teach literacy. So, whereas if I use a book, some book that is not culturally responsive, it's going to feel foreign. I'm going to have to explain a lot to the kid. And so the informational reading is often like that, but then usually when we're using informational text, it's new learning for everyone. We expect it not to connect right away. And then we try with our examples to make it connect. We put this into your handout folder because sometimes in schools, this is what gets celebrated. When we have multicultural night, I know you're not doing that right now, but we think about the food that people eat or the music that they listen to. I'm going to do that a little bit later. You'll see me doing it. And the literature and the celebration and the games, these are all visible things. But below the surface are very important things like attitudes towards elders, how that happens in one culture versus how it happens in another. Or maybe how the character solves problems. Maybe the way that happens in English is different than the way that problem solving would happen in another cultural context. Maybe how the relationships that are shown of extended family are very important in one culture, whereas the nuclear family is more important in another. And it's this deep culture that gets reflected in culturally responsive text. And we want to make sure that children are noticing this, okay? So this is the cross-cultural learning. We're not just wanting them to start playing music that is played in the other cultural context. We also want them to start to understand this deep culture, the unspoken rules, the norms, the values of the other group. Okay, this is what's important. So some people, instead of calling these texts culturally responsive, they call them culturally sustaining, because they're sustaining the values that children come to school with. And so when these books all have to do with Arabic English and Muslim cultural contexts. And so these reflect valued behaviors, traditions, norms, and they help children become citizens of the world, and they promote intercultural understanding, appreciation, and respect. And they illustrate experiences that trigger talking and promote storytelling, at least in one of the groups of our children. And the biggest thing is, I don't want to have Mary Smith books or even Tommy DePaula books in translation. I want to have books that are written by authors and illustrated by artists from children's cultural communities, because what it teaches them is, I could be a writer just like Henna Khan. I could be an illustrator just like Aliyah Jalil. I hope I'm saying that okay. And likewise, sometimes there are painful experiences that children need to be able to talk about that they've experienced. Sometimes children experience separation from family members that they love so much, and now they don't get to see them because they moved to the mainland or they moved to the US, the continental US, and maybe they actually experience loss. Gosh, right now with the coronavirus, maybe children need to talk about the losses that they're experiencing in their families. And so there is a branch of literacy called bibliotherapy, and it's reading books that contain an experience that I myself am struggling with. Usually it's thought of as divorce, separation, death of a grandparent, death of a pet, something like that. But with dual language context, there could be other types of experiences children are all having. My middle schoolers in San Francisco, my sixth graders, they were very homesick for Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico. They had a lot of nostalgia when we would go on field trips and get out in the country outside of San Francisco. That was a flood of talk because they were finally in the countryside, and they missed that. They missed rural environments, living in the city, in the concrete jungle. So these types of books allow kids to reflect on experiences that they're going through or that they've gone through. And so these are really important stories for us to be reading. And for this, we need to know who our populations are. Maybe they're migrants, maybe they're refugees, maybe they're immigrants, maybe they're born in the United States and they're in language minority communities. We need to know that, so we choose the right books, the right mirror books. And also this, we want to make sure that we have many, many, many books in our collections that reflect the lives of bilingual, bicultural children, that value bilingualism and biliteracy, that show the joy and richness of bicultural lives and experiences, the importance of children's extended family members, maybe the titles and names that they give them. Why is this book called Abuela? And we're going to see a book later where they use the Chinese name for grandfather. Kids from those cultures, and my daughter-in-law is from a French-American family. She never calls her grandfather anything but Pepe. That's who he is. And she never, ever even thinks of him as grandfather. So we want to make sure that we're reflecting that in the books that we have. And I always use this slide to say it's not so matchy-matchy. That's my crazy way of saying it, that I don't have to have Cuban books for Cubans and Jordanian books for people from Jordan. I could have a book that is about a Korean experience, but it's an experience that all dual language kids have had. So this, in Dear Juno, this book would work for a lot of kids. It won't just work for Korean kids. Here, the main character can't write to his grandmother because he doesn't know Korean, and she can't write to him because she doesn't know English. And so it shows how they work to communicate with one another. It's a beautiful little book, and I'm sure many of you know it. And this one talks about how this little girl, when she writes her name in Korean, it doesn't even feel like her. She hates her English name. And so she's screaming, "My name is Yoon," and she wants to be able to have people recognize her name. So we all know as bilingual, bicultural professionals how important names are. So it doesn't have to be so matchy-matchy. I could have a book that's written for another cultural group, but it's really going to connect with my kids. I do want those of you in the early grades to know there's a ton of early reader, culturally responsive alphabet books, and I'm showing just a few of them on screen. This series on the right, they did it for every country, really. An alphabet book that shows pictures from various countries. The Costa Rica ABCs, you know, even you're working with a child from El Salvador, they might enjoy this introduction of literacy better than one all in English. Okay, so just remember to be looking for these books. This is something I love to do, by the way, hunt for these books. So if you're hunting for something and not finding it, I might not find it either, but I will give it my all to hunt with you. So this is one for kids from the Caribbean, anywhere, Haiti, Puerto Rico, you know, anywhere in the Caribbean. And here, it's all happening in English, but instead of teaching C words in English, they're using words like caiman, culebra, cuba, etc. And they're using illustrations that feel wonderful to kids. So we want to be finding these books even when we're teaching things about English. So some of the questions you want to ask yourself is, does the book that I'm thinking to use capture authentic experiences of children and families? Does the book avoid stereotypical topics? Like, you can't imagine how many books when I was hunting for Chinese English stories had to do with Chinese New Year. And that's wonderful. Chinese New Year is important, but it's not the only thing that goes on in Chinese speaking communities. So we need to find things that don't only include these stereotypical topics. And Cinco de Mayo, gee, that might not be anything that would connect at all with a lot of our kids. That's a Mexican thing, you know, more of Central America, maybe, and Mexico. Does the book affirm bilingualism and biculturalism? Does the book present an accurate portrayal of character, setting, and plot? And is the language of the text accurate? I had this problem with Haitian Creole, that I found a text in Haitian Creole and I was all excited because I liked the story from what I could tell from the pictures. But then when I sent it to people at the Arburn, they said it was horrible. And it was, because a lot of the language was all messed up. So it's a challenge sometimes to find the books that do all of this. But I want to encourage you to, this is like a basic checklist. Now, another thing we have to decide is whether to use a single language or a dual language text, because we want to reflect, this is what translanguaging is all about, the full linguistic and cultural knowledge and experience of bilinguals. So sometimes we can find a book that exists independently in both languages, such as I'm showing on the screen. And other times we find books where both languages are present in the same book. It's not two books, it's one book with both languages in there. So the advantage of the one on the left is I can keep the focus on one language at a time, and the other book could be given as a reference tool for kids to use when they need it, but they should be encouraged to stay in the target language of instruction, whether it's English or Spanish in the case that I'm showing on the left. Whereas on the right, then we have to make sure that kids are not just looking at the language they know well, so that the English speakers are just avoiding the Arabic and only looking at the English, or the English speakers are only looking at the English and not the Spanish. We have to make sure that they're using both languages, or the language I want them to use. However, these books on the right allow them to make cross-linguistic comparisons, which really aids with metalinguistic awareness. So they each have strengths and they each have weaknesses. If you're using a dual language book, you have to decide, you need to really pay attention to what language comes first. If it's a top and bottom arrangement of text on a page, you want to make sure that English is not always at the top and the other language always at the bottom. If it's a left-right arrangement, you want to make sure that English is not always the one you come to first on the left, and later you get the other language. So we want to be asking that. More importantly, we want to ask which culture is reflected in this book, the characters, events, and settings. What about the art and the illustrations? And then the same questions I asked you earlier. So, and in the case of Arabic, English, we want to know, how does the text open? Where is the front of the book? What we consider front of the book in English is the back of the book. In Arabic, what we would call that in English is the front of the book in Arabic. I don't know if I'm kind of saying that in a confusing way, but we want kids to notice that. So what I loved about this book, this is a Lee and Low book, and you're going to see me talking about some of their books because they meet a lot of the criteria that I'm sharing with you today. One is who they choose as authors and illustrators, where they put text on a page. And so this book is a good example of what they do, that if the text on a page is arranged top to bottom, English is at the top and Spanish is at the bottom. However, if the arrangement is left-hand page, right-hand page, Spanish is on the left and English is on the right. So they alternate where you find each language. So this is an example, English at the top and Spanish at the bottom. Look at the beautiful illustration and the colors. And then here's the same book. When it's a left hand, right hand, there's Spanish on the left and English on the right. So they're really teaching kids, I don't have a preference. I don't always put English first. Why in a lot of the dual language books does English come first? Because they're trying to sell it to everybody. And so they're trying to put the English first so more people buy it. And so it's hard. We have to work hard to find these books that alternate. When you look at books, you also want to notice the awards. For those of you that are Spanish English, there are awards. Pura Belpré, if you don't know about her, was the first Puerto Rican librarian in New York City, and she's the first Spanish-speaking librarian to offer story hour to children in Spanish. And so that is actually the story of the Storyteller's Candle, which I showed you back here. That Storyteller's Candle is a story about Pura Belpré, and now they've created an award in her name, and every year, and it's by the American Library Association, it is awarded to a book that honors Pura Belpré and the work that she did. So there's a lot of other awards other than Caldecott awards. We want to notice that. We want to notice the artwork. We want to notice the length of the book, because sometimes we like a book, but it's too long. And the trick that I use is to either use a sticky pad to join pages together or a paper clip, and just making sure that the pages that I clip, when I'm skipping pages, the story will still make sense when I jump ahead and I skip some pages. But we can shorten books sometimes that way. With a chapter book, we can just read certain chapters and then provide summaries for some of the chapters if it's taking a long time to get through a book, let's say, with the two groups. And we want to notice the loveliness of the language, because we would like to use it as a mentor text for the teaching of writing. And we also want to see how it might promote wide reading. Like if I should like this book by Amada Irma Perez, then I can look for other books by her, right? I can say, oh, I love her books, and I can start to read more books that she's written. So now I'm going to ask you, and I want all of you to have an opinion. What about translations? Is that a good or a bad idea for the goals of dual language programs? So here I found that I could find the Hungry Caterpillar in a lot of languages. You see them on the screen, Spanish and Arabic and Chinese and Russian. And my question for you, is that a good idea? Do you think it supports the goals of dual language programs? And I think all of you know where you place your answer in the chat box, but go ahead and voice your opinion. And I know some of you are going to write it depends, and that's okay too, but make sure you're very clear what you think. Okay, so you all can see the chat. I'm not going to be looking at that with you, but I do want to share that my bias is I would not use translations unless I had to, unless I was forced to, because there were so few books in my partner language. I would never use this book in Spanish. That's my bias, because it doesn't reflect an experience that is authentic to the Spanish-speaking world. Talking about sausage and lollipops and the things that go on in that book, and Eric Carle, I don't need to have a book in Spanish by Eric Carle. There's plenty of people writing authentically in Spanish from the Spanish-speaking world, and it's those authors and experiences I want to honor. I do not want to just use a translated book. So I have very strong opinion about this, and which you may share or not share. But I could have a situation where I just cannot find enough books in Arabic or Russian, and I might be forced to use a translation. But then I would say to you, make sure that the children are noticing that it's not really an experience that's emanating from that cultural reality. You should, in the early grades, be looking for patterned and culturally responsive text in the early grades. And this is one, again, it's another Lee and Low title, but it's pattern text. Here they come, I see maps. Here they come, I see flags. Here they come, I see lights, excuse me. But here you see that sometimes, unfortunately, everything is focused on New Year's celebrations, and we need to find these books that are representing other experiences other than it is an important holiday, but it's not the only thing that goes on in the community. So, and this exists in Spanish, and this might be something I do want to read about because I'm trying to broaden kids' worlds. Remember, I'm trying to make sure that maybe there are children in the school, maybe there are things that go on in their neighborhood that they need to understand. I'm trying to make sure I'm creating citizens of the world, right, in the readings that I do. This one, to me, it reflects better. This is Pat Mora, and she is a Mexican-American writer. This is pattern text. On the table, we see a pot of beans, we see grated cheese, we see a stack of warm tortillas, we see a green salad. So it's we see in English. And in Spanish, it's vemos una olla, vemos el queso, vemos un montón de tortillas, vemos una ensalada. We're seeing the same repeated line of text, but this one is great because it's not about a holiday. It's about things that naturally go on in certain households. And again, you might question if this is a food that's eaten by your families, and remembering that she's Mexican-American. But perhaps some of your children, this is food that they eat. And so we might stop on the pages to talk about things that the children do eat in their families, right? But this one is culturally responsive and it's early pattern text. When we teach colors, this is something that goes on in kindergarten. Why not find books that do this with reference from the world of our children? So this is all happening in English, but when it teaches the color white, it's teaching it with items that would be found in a Muslim environment. So white is a kufi, round and flat. Grandpa wears this traditional hat. And I'm sure grandpa's not called grandpa, but you get the drift. And we want to have books, like single language books that go home to our families. These are Arabic books, Arabic only. And we do want these to go home so that the family can feel that their world is being reflected in the books that we're sharing. These ones promote closeness and show the safety and security of family and community. So in this story, one of the fears young children have is of being lost. It's also a fear of people that don't speak English well, that if they would get lost in New York City, oh my God, how am I going to find my way back home if I take the wrong subway? And things like that. So this one ends well, where the child is lost, but does find their way home. It's chasing a kitten and he gets lost, but at the end is reunited with mom. So this has a satisfying ending for children, and it allows families to say, I will find you. Wherever you are, don't you ever worry, I will find you. So that's just to say we should, for those of you teaching in kindergarten, these are the kind, and maybe first grade, these are important books for us to have in our collection. So we want a lot of books that connect to the families and communities that we serve. And so even the books are in English, or maybe they're bilingual books, which is terrific. We want to make sure that they're representing experiences that relate to families, because when we send unfamiliar books with unfamiliar experiences home, the parents don't really even know what they're supposed to do with it. And we really want to support our family's ability to contribute to the literacy of their children. So we want to send home books that students can read alone or with family members, and especially now recorded books, books that are on YouTube. If any of you are using Edpuzzle, I'll be talking about that a lot more in our next session. There are a ton of books already in Edpuzzle that somebody else has recorded, and you just have to assign it to your students. So remember that a lot is out there that you could be using that's culturally responsive, and you can use it in distance learning. But make sure that it's high quality books that are originally written in the home language so that it will reflect the home language community. And make sure that some of the books invite storytelling in any language. Some of our parents were cheated of an education, and I really want to say it that way. They had to go to work. They didn't have the privilege of staying in school. And in many countries, what's called the last grade that everybody has to attend could be 6th grade or 8th grade. And then they leave and they go to work. So they might not have really strong literacy in their native language because they were cheated. And we want to make sure that they can still contribute to their child's literacy development. Alma Florada, who many of you know about because of the Cervantes Institute and other things that the Arburn does with you. Alma Florada found that parents listening to their child read is as important and as helpful as parents reading to their child. And I'm saying that slowly and carefully because I want you to capture it. Having the parent as audience for their child's reading is as significant to literacy development and as supportive to literacy development as having the parent read to the child. And the child and the parent can sit and listen to the same book read through Edpuzzle, through YouTube, and they both get to enjoy the story and talk about it afterwards. We want to make this possible for our families and include and purchase as many dual language books as possible that families will enjoy reading with one another. The kinds of things that we send home should be different than the didactic objectives that we have as teachers. It should be things that are suited to family life. So I'm really stressing that with you. Parents are not the alternate educator, teacher at home. And you know, we want to respect the role that they're in. When I read books to my son, I did not pick up, I was not doing it didactically. I was reading books we would enjoy reading together. And I want you to think about what you read with your child. So now we're going to explore this tool that you can use to build a classroom library. This is in the handout folder. I hope you already downloaded it because we're going to use it next. And we're going to engage in an activity that all of you are going to do. And when you finish, I'm going to ask only certain people to enter their input into the chat box but I'm not going to tell you who those people are right now because I want you all to engage in this. So please find this checklist in the handout folder, or hopefully, we hope you've already downloaded it and it's easy for you to find because we're going to use it next. And from now on till the end of the day, we have about an hour together. I'm going to be using world music interludes while you're my students today, like it or not. And I'm going to use world music interludes when I want you to think or I want you to work. And this is a strategy you could be using with your students too. I'm only going to use world music that reflects the languages that we're concentrating on today. So Arabic, Chinese, Haitian Creole, Russian, and Spanish. Okay, I'm not going to give any support to English. It gets enough support. And as you hear the music, see if you can make a guess. Where in the world is that music from? Whose music is that? Okay, because it's going to be one of the 5 I just mentioned. So I want you in the next activity, and I'm going to give you 4 minutes, a total of 4 minutes, and this is a 2-sided handout, 2-page handout. I want you to look over the various considerations on this checklist, and there's lots of little questions asked here on the right, but they're in categories of things you should be noticing about books. And I would like you to find 3 questions over here that you think are extremely important, more important than some of the others on the list, but I want you to be able to say why. So there's probably 30 questions over here in the 2 pages. And I want you to only find 3 that you would say, those are the most, if I could only have 3, which 3 would it be that I would look at? So I hope everybody's understanding. Is everybody okay? Like give a thumbs up that, some of the other people looking at the chat can see. Is everybody ready? So here comes the music for while you work. And I'm only going to give you 3 minutes. I changed my mind. You're not even going to get 4. Okay, so now in the chat box, and Maria, maybe you can help me again. If your first name starts with B or C or D, only if your first name begins with a B, letter C, or letter D, please put your answer into the chat box. You don't have to do all 3 questions. You could just type in one. And if any of you have a guess about where that music comes from, tell us your guess in the chat box.
Some people have done that already. They've guessed, they've enjoyed the music very much, and they've already told us what they think.
So after you see about 15 or so responses, Maria, then you can read some of them to me.
Sure.
So just a few as examples, Maria, because our
Sure.
time is
Well,
short.
is the cover of the book visually appealing and relevant to the students and families with whom you work?
It starts right there. It starts with the cover, people. Really check out the cover.
So how about, does the story use natural language and authentic dialogue that children can recognize?
That's really super important. And so you want to make sure that that's true, that it really sounds like the community that kids come from. And if there's a lot of translanguaging that goes on in the community, the book should have translanguaging.
Do the characters have similar experiences that are familiar to the students?
Very, very important. Give me 2 more.
Does the text provide concrete examples and make comparisons to content, experiences, or places that are familiar to the students? Authenticity, are the language patterns and family relationships, cultural conventions, and values accurately depicted? I imagine is what they want to say. Considering all of the language of the learners you teach, is there an equal amount of books?
Yes, thank you for that one. And I'm going to cut it off there, even though I'm sure that everything in the chat is fantastic. And I will be reading everything in the chat later on, and I will have read it before we get together again. And thank you, people whose first name starts with B, C, and D. You helped us out tremendously. But I'm going to have to fly a little bit now to make sure that everything happens that I want to make happen today. So that first part might have felt like, oh yeah, we know about culturally responsive books. But the reason I wanted to do it was to say that you find a culturally responsive book, and then what? So then what? It's not part of my literacy program. Nobody else wrote down objectives for me. What do I do? So what we're going to model for you is a protocol that you could be using with any book to pull out all the reading skills and strategies and things that you need to do, all the objectives that you could have when you teach any book you can put your hands on. So the most important thing is that you put your hands on something good, like everyone just said in the chat. It's got to be a great book. And if it's a great book, I don't have any problem planning lessons for it. And I can be working on all my grade level skills. So that's what we want to model for you now. So the things that we're going to look at very explicitly is what background knowledge would I have to build for maybe at least some of the kids sitting in front of me before and during reading. You don't have to do everything ahead. Some of it could be done as you're reading, but there will be kids sitting in front of me where maybe I have to provide some background knowledge. And I'll use an example for you about life in Rhode Island. Well, in the whole state of Rhode Island, there is no such thing as a subway. It doesn't exist. If I were to try to read a book to kids where the characters are getting on and off the subway, they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about unless they at some point lived in New York City or they've traveled there. They wouldn't even know what it is. And likewise, you wouldn't know what a cabinet is. You think you know what a cabinet is, but in Rhode Island, a cabinet is a milkshake. So you think you know what it is. And a bubbler is a water fountain. So there's a lot of things that go on in Rhode Island that I had to learn. And otherwise you're left out, even though you think you know what's being talked about. Of course, there's vocabulary development before and during reading, but what I'm going to say to you today is it has to be level specific. I should have different words for beginners, beginning proficiency kids than I have for transitioning kids, than I have for expanding kids. So it's not same for all. I'm not teaching the same 5 words to everybody. I should have different words in mind depending on the proficiency of the learner. And for my native speakers, I should have very advanced words, the tier 3, tier 2. But for kids new to Russian, I'm going to have just some really basic words. And this is possible to do, people. You just give kids different word lists, and those are the words that they're concentrating on. If they're making vocabulary notebooks, those are the words that are in their vocabulary notebook, and so forth. Then we're going to uncover decoding skill practice for both groups of students. What phonics could I teach? And if there is such a thing as sight words, and there will be, because I'm going to do a book in English, our shared language today. What are those words that are in the book that I could be teaching when I teach this book? This next part will be simple for you, the skills and strategies. You can do that in your sleep. What can I do for fluency practice so kids read more fluently, especially if it's a new language and they're halting as they read it? What would I do for cross-linguistic awareness? What could I show them? The book I'm going to show you is a theme across Chinese communities and English-speaking communities. And so what could I show them? Because there will be some Chinese characters used in this book. And what could I do to help build that cross-linguistic awareness? And what could I do for cross-cultural awareness, those deep values that we took the time to talk about? So I want you now to find this form in your handout folder, and I would like you to be filling this out as we go along. And I also want you to find the excerpt that is in your handout folder for Grandfather Counts. It is not every page of the book. So I want you to just find those 2 documents, and you will be able to do it while I play a video of the story, okay? So just know you need to find this template. It's a 2-page template, and you will need to find the excerpt from this book, Grandfather Counts. I want you to notice that when you find a book, you should find out the quantitative information about your book. You should find out the Lexile level, the guided reading level, all of those levels. You need, somebody's sound is on. We need to find that. So in this one, the grandfather comes to visit. You're about to see the whole thing. And these children are meeting the grandfather for the first time. This is the daughter of the grandfather. And the grandfather tries to speak to Helen, and she doesn't understand. And of course, he's disappointed because he wishes she knew Chinese. And so you'll see how the story progresses, because I'm going to show it to you in a minute. But what I want you to think about is we should have these essential questions in mind, and they should tie to the goals of a dual language program. So one such question, here's the cover. We see the grandfather and his granddaughter. We see them holding up fingers. But what do you think could be the possible meanings? What are all the double entendre meanings we could have for grandfather counts? Just think about that. And we could ask other essential questions like, why is communication important? How does it feel when you can't make someone understand you? What are some of the ways you communicate with others across languages and cultures? And we would want to point out the genre to kids, that this is realistic fiction. And from your New York State Next Generation Standards, I pulled out grade 2. This is grade 2 and a grade 3. It's used kind of in between grade 2 and grade 3, as I showed you back here. It's between a 2 and a 3. So I pulled out the grade 3 standards, and these are all the things I could work on while I do this book. So I can meet my grade 3 standards or my grade 2, whichever one I'm pulling out. And these are all very, very doable. I'm not going to read them to you. You can look back at this later, but it is so easy to tie New York State standards to any book you find. And so, but this, only those of you in dual language programs will know to make these your questions. A mainstream monolingual English speaking teacher is not going to think about some of these, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't want to sell them short. But we certainly will think of this because this is our life experience. So now I'm going to play a read aloud. I want you to know that the teacher, this book is in English, so the teacher reading it is an English native speaking teacher, and she's doing her best. At the front of the book, there are the characters and the Chinese words. So Chinese speakers, please forgive any of her mispronunciations. She's really trying hard using the pronunciation at the front of the book. And we're all going to hear the entire story because I gave you an excerpt, and then we will only work with the excerpt, but you will know the full story. And I have to start this at about 2 minutes in. Wait a minute. Yeah, I get that. That's the translation page.
Gong Gong, grandfather, was one of the last people off the plane. He walked slowly toward the crowd, waiting at the terminal. Baba! Baba! Mom shouted. His eyes lit up as he looked in our direction. Mom ran over and hugged him. Dad, Henry, Cece, and I stood back, waiting.
Okay, now I forgot to tell you that this was produced by a second grade teacher with Think Aloud pauses for kids. So you will hear all her Think Aloud pauses.
Think pause. Okay, right from the beginning, what do we already know about grandfather and Helen's mom? Finally, I went closer. Gong Gong patted my head and smiled. Then he said something to me. I looked to Mom for help. Gong Gong says you look very nice, Mom explained. Thank you, I said. Gong Gong kept talking to me in Chinese. When he realized I didn't understand, he turned to Mom, a look of surprise on his face. I wanted to explain that Mom had tried to teach us Chinese. She had gotten us Chinese flashcards with words and pictures. Once, she sent us to Chinese Sunday school, but we didn't want to go back. The kids there already spoke Chinese. They were learning to write characters, and we couldn't understand anything they said. Students, what do you think grandfather expected when he spoke to Helen? On the way home, everyone was quiet. Gong Gong dozed next to me. I watched him and wondered what he was dreaming. Did he dream in Chinese? When we got home, Mom took Gong Gong to his room and shut the door. He's tired, she said. Let him rest. It had been my room. A small back room just big enough for a bed and small desk. From the window, I could see the railroad tracks that ran along the back of the house to places I could only imagine. To get ready for Gong Gong's arrival, we had moved my bed into Cece's room. Her room faced the street. No tracks, no train cars to count as they sped by. Students, Helen is missing her bedroom. Why is that? We put up wallpaper in my room, green with small dots. Mom said it would hide the cracks caused by the rumbling of the trains going by. I missed those cracks, all connected and spreading out from the middle like the branches of a tree in winter. Mom got upset when the last sheet of wallpaper wrinkled near the ceiling. Dad tried to smooth it with his fingers, but it just creased more. It looks okay, I said. No one will see it way up there. Mom wasn't sure. When you do a job, always do it right, she said. Gong Gong told me that when I was 4, and he was teaching me to write my name. He said my name was my family. I shouldn't scribble it any old way, but I was little, and it was hard to make the strokes of the Chinese characters right. I got this picture in my head of Mom as a 4-year-old trying to write with a paintbrush full of lumpy wallpaper paste instead of an ink brush. I started to laugh, but I could see Mom didn't think there was anything funny going on. Helen, Mom said, annoyed, go find something else to do. Suddenly, I felt a lump in my throat. Why was Mom in such a bad mood? All because of Gong Gong? Why does he have to come anyway? I cried. And take my room! Mom looked at me surprised. Then she said quietly, He's my father. It's my duty to take care of him. I didn't want to listen. I ran down the stairs, out the door, and down the path toward the railroad tracks. Okay, this is a think pause. What is the problem that's happening so far? After Gong Gong first tried to speak to us at the airport, he didn't say much to anyone. Cece drew him a picture of flowers and butterflies. He smiled at her and handed the picture back. "It's for you," Cece said, but Gong Gong didn't understand. So I taped the picture to the door. Then he understood. He nodded and smiled at Cece again. "See, he does like it," I told her. One by one, Gong Gong read through the Chinese newspapers he'd brought with him. Mom tried to get him to go out, but most of the time, he just shook his head and went back to his reading. "What will Gong Gong do when he finishes all his newspapers?" I asked Mom. "Give him time," said Mom. "He has so many new things to get used to." Students, what things might be strange to grandfather in a new place where nobody knows his language? Since I couldn't see the train from Cece's room, I waited for it out back on the concrete wall. Sometimes I saw Gong Gong looking down at me from my old room. Soon I realized he wasn't looking at me at all. He was waiting for the train. When the engineer waved to me, Gong Gong reached out and waved back too. Early one evening, I was sitting on the concrete wall waiting for the train when I saw Gong Gong coming down the path. He sat down next to me, his legs hanging over the wall, just like mine. We could feel the train coming before we heard the low rumble. Then there it was. "Er San Se Wu Liao Ji Ba," said Gong Gong, holding up a finger for each car that went by. I liked the way his voice went up and down softly with each word. The engineer waved from the last car and then the train was out of sight. Students, do y'all notice what is happening? What do you think might happen next? Gong Gong said the first word again and looked at me, waiting. I repeated the word, holding up one finger to match his. "Yi," I said. "1, I got it." Slowly, Gong Gong said all the numbers up to 8, and I repeated them. We started over and practiced until I could say them all by heart. Gong Gong clapped for me. Then I held up one finger and said, 1. 1, Gong Gong repeated after me. Before long, he could count to 8 in English. "You did it," I said. Gong Gong took my hands in his and gave them a quick squeeze. I found a small piece of broken concrete and used it to write Helen on the wall. "Helen," I said, pointing to what I had written. "Helen," Gong Gong repeated, tracing the letter with his finger. Then he picked up a piece of concrete and wrote 2 Chinese characters on the wall. "Gong Gong," he said, pointing to the characters. He took my hand and helped me copy his name. Just then, I saw Henry and Cece coming down the path. "I've called you 1,000,000 times," said Henry. "Come on, it's time for dinner." "Sorry," I said. "We didn't hear you. Gong Gong and I were busy." We walked up the path together. "Er San," I said, counting my steps. 4, 5, 6, Gong Gong said, continuing where I left off. At dinner, Dad told us about a new computer program for learning languages. A friend at work had given him a copy of the Chinese version. Dad said it was really great. "It starts out real simple," Dad explained. "The voice says, 'Xiao Hai,' and then you click on the picture of the children." "Xiao Hai," Gong Gong repeated. He smiled and gave Dad a thumbs up. Then Gong Gong looked at me. 3, Xiao Hai, he said. It was my turn to give him a thumbs up. Students, look at the people at this table. Why is everyone smiling? How have they changed? Hey, Mom, what's my Chinese name again? I asked. Yinhua, Mom replied. Gong Gong gave you your name when you were born. Gong Gong, I said, pointing to myself. I repeated, Yinhua. Gong Gong nodded. Then he pointed to Cece and Henry. Yin Wen, Yin Rei. Hey, we're all yin something, said Cece. Yes, because you're all in the same family, said Mom. And you're all the same generation. Cool, said Henry. Okay, students, Helen, Cece, and Henry are learning about their Chinese names. What do they learn about their names? After my bath that night, I walked by my old room. There was Gong Gong sitting at the desk. I looked over his shoulder. He was printing Helen over and over. Gong Gong, you're writing my name, I said. Gong Gong smiled and motioned for me to sit next to him. Then he wrote some Chinese characters and said, Yinhua. Gong Gong handed me the pen and I tried to copy the characters as best I could. I didn't do a very good job, but then he showed me how to make the strokes in the right order. I wrote my name again and did much better. Hen Hao, Gong Gong said, squeezing my shoulder. That meant very good. Mom always said Hen Hao when I brought home my best work from school. Gong Gong stood up and went over to Cece's picture on the door. He pointed to a flower and said, Hua. I understood. Hua means flower. I was Gong Gong's flower. Suddenly, I heard the familiar low rumble. Gong Gong, I said. We looked at each other quickly and then went over to the open window. Yi, er, san, si, wu, liao. I counted. 6, said Gong Gong. 6 cars, I said. 6 cars, Gong Gong repeated slowly. The engineer blew the train whistle as Gong Gong and I waved goodnight to him together. Students, where are Helen and Gong Gong right now? Share your thinking about the ending of this story.
Okay, so we're gonna stop there. I did want you to hear the whole story, but we're just gonna work with the 7-page excerpt that you found in the handout folder. And I do want to mention to you the reason for those breaks was this was first recorded in Edpuzzle. In Edpuzzle, you can upload any story retelling of a book that you want to use with kids, and you can pause at certain places and record your voice asking certain questions. So this started on Edpuzzle, but the whole video that you see, that you just listened to, is now available on YouTube with the questions. Okay, so I just want you to know that. But I hope you can, I hope all of you could imagine that this experience that happened to a Chinese American family could happen for any language group. It's not, yes, all the example was given for Chinese and English, but this might happen in Spanish English, Haitian Creole English, in any household where across the generations, the communication is not there because the children born in the US have not learned their heritage language. So now we're going to work with this template. We're going to fill it out for grandfather counts. Today, I'm modeling for you how things would happen when you're working on literacy in English. But when you come back to us in December, we're going to take the same template and we're going to work on home language literacy or the partner language literacy. And we're not going to do every single panel of this form when you come back because you won't need us to. But we do want to model this across the 2 languages of your program. So as we get started, I'm also going to be modeling for you from now to the end participatory strategies that you can use in your classroom. And the first one I want to model is the use of Answer Garden. So Antoine's going to load for you in the chat this Answer Garden address, and all you will need to do is click on it and you will be taken to my Answer Garden where we will see everybody's answers. So I want you to look across the 7 pages that you have or think about the story that you just heard, and I will play music while you think. And I want you to think about all the experiences that the book assumes children have had or that they would understand. One of them would be travel by plane. Do they understand anything about airports and travel by plane and waiting for someone at the airport, etc. So keep thinking, what are all the things that happen in this story that it just assumes children have had that experience? And I'm going to play more music and you can think, where does this music, what background does this music represent? type in your answers in the answer garden. Okay, so I'm going to stop us only because across all of us, we will pick up a lot of the background knowledge that the book assumes. So let's go to the answer garden and we will see, this is a brainstorming tool that you can use with your kids. And you can set this up easily. At the end of today, we're going to give you a resource list of the things that we're sharing. So knowledge of a railroad, yes. Chinese doesn't use Roman letters, yes. Cultural shock, Chinese values, yes, very big in there. But think about experiences now. Don't think about language. Think about experiences. So the things like, do they know about the railroad? Do they know about living by the railroad? Do they know about railroad tracks? What else might be there? Like we're thinking about only background knowledge, not language. Family coming to live with you. Yes, that's an experience. Geography, where could this take place? Where are there railroads? Right, that's good. That's a background knowledge type thing. So perfect, perfect, perfect. But take out, like, yes, this is an experience, but I think it belongs more where we put the cross-cultural things. So it's not that you're wrong. It's just, it goes in a different place on the form that I'm sharing with you, okay? But yes, what a terminal is, yeah, they need to know about all of that. Okay, so now, let's make sure this is moving on. Oh, it's thinking I want to type. Let me go down here. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Okay, I have to get out of here. Oh, that's what's wrong. Okay. I'm sorry, now I skipped too much. Okay, so these were some of the things that I listed. None of you seem to list the painting and wallpapering, but wallpaper, oh my goodness, that's something that maybe people don't even have in their homes. So that could be something. And at the bottom of this slide, I've listed for you other online tools for brainstorming, a link to that, okay? So just know about that. Okay, let me get here. Okay, so now I want you to think about decoding skills that you could teach. I had a lot of time to look at the book and you're not going to be given that amount of time to look at the book. So I'm going to show you a few decoding skills that could be worked on. And I'm going to put you into groups and we're going to work on a Padlet. Okay, so Antoine will provide you the list, the Padlet in a second. But if your birthday is between January and March, from the beginning of January to the end of March, I want you to look in the excerpt for words with the long A sound. It could be vowel consonant E words like plane, or it could be long A words that use the spelling AI, as in train. If your birthday is from the beginning of April to the end of June, look for words with the long E sound. They could be BCE words like Chinese, or EE words like street, or EA words like dream. So the long E. If your birthday is from the beginning of July to the end of September, please look for the digraph CH or CK, the two digraphs, CH as in teach and CK as in track, All you're looking for is what you're to look for your group, okay? And if your birthday is in the last part of the year, right now, from the beginning of October to the end of December, you're looking for words with the TH digraph, such as in there, okay? So these are your instructions. And now, when you reply, you should be in this Padlet, and as you find words, you put them in the Padlet under your group. Long A words in the first column, long E in the second column, and so forth, okay? And I will be playing music while you work, and then we'll come back to the Padlet.
Nancy, some of the participants are having difficulty finding the excerpt,
It's in the handout folder.
and they're saying that it may not be, but,
Oh, no, it's there. I checked this morning.
okay.
It's there.
Mhm.
It maybe says grandfather count. You should find it. But if you're losing too much time trying to find it, you can just listen into the words that others find, because we've only got 20 minutes. Do your best to find it. It is there. And it starts with the cover, grandfather counts, and then there's just 7 pages following it. It's an 8-page handout. Okay, so even if you're not finished, we're going to go to the Padlet and see what words we have there. Very, very good. So we have some examples in each column, plain and paper, and people are still adding words. That's great. And then for the long E, you found some really good ones. I didn't give you a lot of time. Don't get frustrated with me because we're just running out of time, and I know your time is precious. This gives you an example of how something you could do with kids.
Yes.
Through distance learning, right? You could give them assignments. It could be a jigsaw activity, and then they respond in their group on a Padlet, and you can save the Padlet, and they can also add to it later when they go home. They could get started with the Padlet at school, and they could continue at home. And also the music playing, one of the problems we're having with distance learning is engagement. So when we use those strategies of playing music, especially high energy music, or maybe they need to be calmed down. Maybe they're upset and frustrated and they need calm music. We can use all these things to our advantage when we're doing the distance learning. So I hope that is clear. So I think I have to close out of the Padlet. Yes, I do. Okay, so let me come back down here. So that was a very quick example to give you the idea of how we would find words inside of the book, right? And these are, because I had more time with the book and I had the whole book, it took me a while, but if I'm going to use this book more than once, I didn't mind spending the time looking for these. And so I found a lot of long A words. I found a lot of E words. You found some of these. I didn't give you time to find all of them, and you don't have the full book. I found these across the whole book for the digraph, CH and CK. And I could teach the ACK phonogram, TER-ACK, KER-ACK, BUACK, right? So I could do that. And I found a lot of TH. And if you wanted to do silent letters in English, you could do that too. I was trying to notice everything. When you analyze a book, try to find everything. So all this that we just found would go onto your form. And it would go where it says best decoding skills to teach. I want to study the book once. I want to write down all the things I might be able to teach well with that book. And notice that the kids are supposed to recognize and read grade appropriate irregularly spelled words as the third grade skill. So these sight words with the GH and GHT, these crazy words in English, that might be my objective. I'm not going to do everything that I showed on the list. I'm going to write it all down when I first study the book. But then when I see who's sitting in front of me, that's when I'm going to decide what I'm going to teach. Or maybe I let the grade level skill direct what I teach. Maybe I'm not going to do any of the phonics that you just did, and I'm just going to do these irregularly spelled words. Like, who could guess how through is spelled? Really? Or enough? Who could guess how to spell that word? Nobody. So, you know, these are sight words, and that might be what we would concentrate on. So that's the type of thing we would put in the second box. Now, the third box is for the differentiated vocabulary. And so in this box, notice I've distributed it across entering and emerging as one group, transitioning as a second group, expanding, commanding, and native language speakers as the third group. So I'm not going to have 100 groups for vocabulary. I'm suggesting you have 3 groups: lower proficiency, mid proficiency, high proficiency. And so given that in a dual language program, you have heritage language speakers of your language, and you have English speakers just learning the language, all of your kids would fit somewhere proficiency wise. Now, I like to focus in a book on a type of word, and I feel a neglected type of word are verbs. I find kids get to high levels of proficiency and they're still using very low level verbs like go and have and is and want. And they're not learning to use words like realize, scribble, imagine, you know, I don't know which one, doze. They're not doing doze and so forth. Or face as a verb, right? Or squeeze, you know, they know it when they hear it and they know what it means, but they're not using it in their writing. So I've distributed verbs from this text into boxes. You don't have to agree with me. You could dispute where I put the verbs. But what I would like you to do is to choose 4 to 6 target words for each proficiency level that you think it would be worth learning, because if students are going to retell the story or discuss story events, they would need those. They would need those verbs, okay? So you're not just choosing helter-skelter 4 to 6, you're choosing them because you think they could be used when the students retell the story, okay? So I'm gonna give you some music to work by. Pick 4 in each category because you think they could be used when they retell the story. Not sure why that's not playing. Let me check it. Okay, and I'm going to have to stop us there, but I think you get the drift. And a point that I would like to make is that research has shown that when you choose words, when teachers choose words, they tend to choose concept words, which are nouns, and they tend to choose descriptive words, most notably adjectives. And teachers are ignoring, language teachers are ignoring verbs, and they're ignoring adverbs, and they're ignoring prepositions. So there's all kinds of word types, right? Those parts of speech. And unfortunately, when we are teaching a book, because we're focused on the content, them understanding the story, and so we tend to focus on those nouns. And I really want to encourage you to make yourself notice other things that you could be teaching so that there's a richness to children's language. And I'm going to say whatever you wrote is perfect. The only criteria you needed was they could use it in the retelling. Okay. And so I can find a lot of verbs, but they're not all equally important for the retelling of the story. So when I pick the ones I'm actually going to focus on, because research around how many words can you teach says between 4 and 6, exactly what I asked you to notice. 4 to 6 in total as you teach the book. New words that you know are new for your kids and that they can use and get a workout around, that they can actually practice them, not just hear you say and then you explain what it means and they never get to use it. They need that word. So you want to make sure, like wave, they need it to talk about what they were doing to the train engineer. Now, another type of word or another type of vocabulary objective I could have in this book is to teach them about compound words. And so I'm just going to give you literally 30 seconds, maybe more, maybe 40 seconds. See if these are 2 compound words. See if you can find more. Okay, so Maria, could you read me some of the words in the chat box if some got entered there?
Yes, well, wallpaper, railroad, paintbrush.
Fantastic. Okay, so these were the ones that I found having more time with the book than you had.
Butterflies.
Pardon me?
Butterflies, they keep coming.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we want to make sure that these words are in the book, right? So, and then we want to show kids how these words work. And in the case of, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, in the case of Chinese, when you're putting characters together, it is kind of like compounding, right? So we want to show these familiar concepts about how words work across our languages. And the next 2 boxes, I think you will find easy to fill. What reading skills could you teach? What reading strategies you could teach? And so I'm just going to make quick mention of them. So on reading skills and strategies, I listed some. Can you list one more skill you could teach with this book? Just one more reading skill you could teach beyond the ones that I listed in the box. Okay, and then some reading strategies that you could teach. Okay, I'm sure we're getting a lot in there. This is endless, right? Skills and strategies. So here I would go back to my standards, make sure I'm doing what the standards want me to do, but I would also notice what skills my kids are having trouble with and what strategies they never ever use. Never do it.
Important to our participants, Nancy, is character analysis.
Yes, thank you. Right. So because there are some characters that are shown in this book, yes, we would want that too, right? So this has a little bit of translanguaging happening with it in the sense that they do show us some words in Chinese in the front cover.
And also the transition of the characters throughout the story.
Yes, right. Oh, the characters themselves. Thank you. Oh, now I get it. Not characters as in Chinese characters.
No, no,
The
no.
characters. Yeah, who the character setting and plot. Yes, thank you. I'm with you now.
Okay.
Okay, so then for fluency, there are things that we can do for fluency, such as partner reads. You would need, if you're using Google Classroom, it does have a breakout room extension, and you could throw the kids into breakout rooms and they could do partner reads. They could just listen to, like I played the whole book for you. They could listen to that and hit pause and do repeated reading. The video could say a line, they could hit pause, then they could try to repeat that line. And the advantage of video is they can regress and they can listen to it as many times as they want. So they could do echo reading. And one of the reasons I selected that telling of the story was I love that teacher's expression. She just made it almost like a movie for us, the way that she read it. Even, I'm sure she did make a few errors with the Chinese, but she showed kids how to read with expression, and I love that. And one of the things I wanted you to know is this is a Reading Rainbow book, and now if you have the Reading Rainbow app, you might have it. This book is in there, and then they could listen to LeVar Burton's version of Grandfather Counts. You won't be able anymore to get the Reading Rainbow for free. It's no longer on PBS. It's now an app called Sky Library, and I think it does cost something like $10 a month. But if you find enough books in there that you like, you might be able to convince your program to buy a subscription. Okay, and look at all the videos I found on Grandfather Counts, and I didn't load any ones that I didn't like. And this one shows you a writing activity that you could do afterwards. And this read aloud asks questions as the book is read, comparing and contrasting the characters. This read aloud shows you how to teach it leading up to a reader response journal, and also teaching about realistic fiction. But this one, the downside was, I don't think she used the guide of how to pronounce the Chinese name. So I was a little disappointed about that. So, but you'll be the judge. You want to model fluent expressive reading and then have them use pause to work on their fluency. Now for cross-cultural, we'll just have to do a couple think alouds now. What would your kids not know? What Chinese tradition, Chinese background, people from who speak Chinese, who live in Chinese speaking communities, help us. What were some of the Chinese traditional values that, like, do things well, write your name well, and take your time, and don't do it sloppy? It's your name. So what other things would your kids relate to that are kind of cross-cultural in nature? And so some of you might want to type some things into the chat. No music, sorry.
Can I read some, Nance?
Yes, please.
It's my duty to take care of him.
Yes, the duty.
Yes.
The duty to take care of your elders.
Having a collectivist worldview.
Yes, the family name comes first, not your individual name. It's not that individualist thing that we have in English, like, I'm not like my brother. You know, treat me as an individual. It's collectivist culture, right? Perfect.
Giving up your room for a visitor or your meals at a dinner time.
Even she referred to it as my room.
Yes.
Whereas in certain families, it would be a room. It's anybody's room.
Enjoying a big family, a family dinner, eating together at the table.
Wonderful. And some were eating with chopsticks, and the
yes.
father was eating with a fork. So I noticed some of those things. Having two names, a lot of people from Asian backgrounds give themselves an English name to be kind to English speakers. It's not that they like the English name usually. They do it because they know you're having difficulty and they're trying to be kind to you. So, you know, these are some of the things that you might notice, but you should notice when you're reading a culturally responsive book, what are the cross-cultural connections? I can make sure that this could be new. Also, you know, to use the title of the person. A lot of kids call their teacher Miss. It's not because they don't know your name. They're trying to show respect.
Yeah.
In the same way that if you're Catholic, you would call your priest father, right? And so this is like an honorific term. It's not because they don't know your name. So these are things that we might have to point out to certain people in the dual language program, because how else are they going to know it? We have to help them become more cross-culturally competent. And then there are things we have to teach them that are cross-linguistic. And so there is translanguaging in the text. Sometimes in the text, they look at, even in the title, they call him grandfather, but really that's not his name. These are the names. And so what does tone mean in Chinese versus what tone means in English? And ways that numerals are written, and drawing to communicate as a strategy. And then maybe this one, you know, this could be ideas for their own writing, that when they write a book that crosses cultures, they should use the authentic language for certain interactions. Like, don't call him grandfather. That's not what he's called. He's called Gong Gong, right? So we could tell kids they can make a choice of language when they're writing, and this book would be a mentor text for how that can be done. Okay, so these are, I hope, Nancy, this is right. These are the modern Chinese numerals. And something else we could point out is comma usage, how commas are used or not used across the languages. And this would be interesting for kids to learn how to write certain numbers, especially after this book that's so focused on the numbers. So hopefully this would be motivational. This could be part of our bridging. And there are other things we could notice, such as, what kind of art is this? Is this pastels? Is this oil paintings? Are these charcoal drawings? What was the technique used by the illustrator? Some kids don't want to be authors, but they might really like to be illustrators. So I think it's good to show them the techniques that are used in the books. How the illustrations capture the feelings of the characters, what is eaten at dinner time, how and when the two languages appear in the environmental print, and so forth, right? So all of that could be noted on the form. I only want to look at this book once, and it is going to take me quite a bit of time when I look at it if I fill this form out, but it's worth it because I'm ready for any kid that sits in front of me anytime I use this book. And I can use it with differentiation because I've figured out all the things I can do with the book. So now it's time, we'll take a few questions or comments or concerns. You know that we are, what we're trying to model here is that you use a planning template like this for your culturally responsive text so that you can plan your literacy and your cross-linguistic and your cross-cultural lessons around that book. So what would you all like to say? I promise I won't let this go on more than a couple minutes, but feel free, all of you, to put things in the chat because I will be reading it after today before we meet again on December 12th. So Maria, read me some things.
Okay, come on, guys. Somebody just mentioned that the elders expect Spanish to be spoken by the children regardless of where they're born. Spanish.
Absolutely. And I think this is common. Portuguese households, Italian, they're disappointed when they find out their grandchildren didn't learn the language.
I have a quick question. For children, we talked about phonics and meta language. For children that, for example, I have an Arabic speaking child that is 5 years old. If she hasn't learned the alphabet in Arabic, can we just begin teaching her that part of it, the phonics, the word knowledge in English?
Well, remember you have that option of sequential or simultaneous, but if you're a bilingual program, my assumption is that you would either be teaching Arabic sequentially or simultaneously, not that you would just jump to English. But if you are the English side, your job is to teach the English. You need that Arabic speaking partner to be working with you. If it's a bilingual program, it has the goal of reading in two languages.
It's not a bilingual, it's a transition. I should have said that, sorry.
It's well, even in transitional, we are trying to use the home language. So if it's a 5-year-old, I think we have an obligation. They're stronger, their oral language is stronger in Arabic, and we should do a little, at the first year, we should do some teaching of Arabic literacy. That's my opinion. but you need someone who knows the Arabic, right? In a transitional bilingual program. And and you'll be doing the English too, right? If you're doing simultaneous.
And there's one that you haven't mentioned, maybe because it's not in the purview, but the program being ESL program only when there is no bilingual program.
Yes, well, we were hoping
language service program of English.
Yes, I understand, but today was really focused on bilingual and dual language programs. There will be other PDs focused for ENL, but just to answer your question, if you are only ENL, of course, you're not a bilingual program, and then of course you're just going to do English, but it would be good that you know a lot about Arabic because it will help you when you're teaching writing to know why kids are making certain guesses. But there will be other opportunities for those of you that are only ENL to attend PD offered by the Arburn at NYU. Today was for TBE and dual language programs.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Good.
I'm a transitional bilingual teacher and most for the 2nd and 3rd grade students. And I do have a handful of students that are still not literate in their first language. Is my approach to teach them, at least their alphabet and syllables in Spanish before transitioning to English. Would that be something that you
Yes.
agree with?
Yes, I would recommend it because they will go so much. I remember I was middle school, and before I was middle school, there was such a thing as a junior high school. That's how long ago I was teaching. And I was teaching 9th graders, but if they came to me and they were pre-literate in Spanish, and I always use pre-literate, not illiterate. If they were pre-literate in Spanish, I showed them the Spanish first because it's so much easier to get literacy off the ground if they're a new arrival and they speak Spanish. So yes, I would take the time to work on early literacy, which would be pattern text and syllabic decoding, right?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Hi, everyone. I was thinking just about that throughout this PD. I'm in a transitional bilingual program, and I was thinking about what our colleague just said about the students that come to this country and they have very low skills in their native language. That happens a lot in the community I work in. So I was thinking about that population throughout this PD.
Yes, and what I would tell both of you is if you're in a transitional bilingual program, the expectation, the traditional model of transitional bilingual education goes like this. Year 1 in the program, no matter what grade level they're in, you use almost like 90% Spanish and only a little bit of English. You're just starting to get English off the ground. Now you might dispute that and go, well, I'm doing 60-40 or 70-30, but the bulk of what you're doing with them should be in mother tongue because you're trying to strengthen their mother tongue before they go into English. And then in year 2, you would up the ante and they would be doing more and more and more in English, like 50-50. And then by year 3, you've forgotten about the Spanish and you're doing mostly English because you're about to transition them into an all English environment. So TBE is a wedge. You start mostly with native language support. You favor native language to make sure A, they keep learning their science, social studies, and math, and B, their literacy gets strengthened before they go into English. I hope this is making sense to you.
Yes, it does. I'm sorry, Nancy, it does make sense. And we're taking into consideration the fact every grade level, right? Because I'm a 5th grade teacher. Because there's so many students that come into 5th grade and they don't know how to read in their native language.
I understand. So yes, if they're in a TBE program, I do understand because new arrivals can come at any grade.
Exactly.
And by the way, I want to say a TBE program is overwhelmingly complex because some of the kids sitting in front of you have been in the program for 2 years or 3 years, and some sitting in front of you just got there, and you have to do something for each individual that makes sense. So TBE is really challenging. It is very challenging to do the right thing for kids, and I do understand your struggles. It's not that I don't understand what you're asking me or how complex my answer sounds so simple, and that reality is so complex. I'm not missing the point. But if they are if they come from a place where they haven't been exposed to English and they're a new arrival. Now, if they're born in the US, that's a different story, right? But if they're a new arrival and they haven't learned to read and write in their native language, I would rather teach them reading and writing first in Spanish than English. But if they are born here and they've only ever been exposed to English, that's a different story. So you have to look at their proficiency profile. And these are good questions that you're asking. These are excellent questions that you're asking.
Yeah, and we have to bring some, and I say this with the utmost respect, we have to bring all this information, this wonderful information, to some administrators who are not supportive of the population.
Right,
we,
right.
You know,
Nancy,
we work with.
I know that you have done workshops for this subject, right?
Yes.
You have done, if there is some type of way that you can maybe bring that back, I would love to participate.
Okay, so it's something that the Arborn can be thinking about. We are about to get your feedback, so let me wrap up because we're a little over time. I just want you to know that at the end of this PowerPoint, there are resources for you. And the first thing that's there, it shows you the distance learning resources that I use. I did not list Edpuzzle yet because I haven't really had us do something with Edpuzzle, but I will be showing you Edpuzzle next time. But today I showed you how to do polls. If you don't use Zoom, you can use a free platform, a website called Poll Everywhere. Chat, if you don't have Zoom, you can do a chat on a Google extension.
And they're gonna get the evaluation. Can you say something on chat?
I will. The Jamboard and royalty-free music. If you put music, make sure it's royalty-free. We practiced with Answer Garden. You saw what that was, and we did a Padlet. You know what that is. For the book that we read, and for lots of books that you might have in your library, there are teachers. If a book is published by Lee and Low, there's a teacher guide for everyone. And for a lot of scholastic books, there are teacher guides too. These are some of the sources you can go to beyond Lee and Low that I kept referring to. And Jane Fleming in Chicago has a website called Kids Like Us. And on there are many, many books that she suggests to you. And where that title came from, where kids in Chicago were coming up to her and saying, "Miss, can't we read books about kids like us?" And I think that's so cute. So she created a website called Kids Like Us, and it only lists books that are culturally responsive books. And then Colorine Colorado, who all of you know about, have books that are culturally responsive. And next time, I want you to bring 3 to 5 books home. Make sure you have 3 to 5 books at home that they're your books, you use them in English or the partner language, whichever one you teach in, or bring books in both languages if you teach in both languages, and focus on trade books that you use with children in your program. I'd like it to be either culturally responsive children's literature or informational text. Because next time we're going to do activities and I will model with a book, but then I want you to do the practice with your books. Okay, so is that clear? Like bring 3 to 5 books and texts with you next time. And now we need you to complete the evaluation. Here's my emails if you need to contact me in between. We can't wait to see you on December 12th. We'll be doing all ideas for distance learning delivery of literacy instruction. So looking forward to seeing you all then. Thanks for being patient and going over a little bit with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Put your comments in the chat and fill out the evaluation.
The link for the feedback evaluation is on the confirmation of the email. In addition, I've added the link to the chat several times. It takes less than 2 to 3 minutes. If you could fill that out, we would really appreciate it.
Xiomara, people are asking about availability of the PDF and can they click on the links?
I'm not sure. Antoine may have to modify the PDF. The PDF is not shared unless it's the PowerPoint is only shared as a PDF to protect Nancy's copyright. Right. And so it would have to be shared as a PDF. Antoine can.
No, you can click on most of the links. You can click on them and they work. And there'll just be a few that might not work. And there you would have to sit and type it in. But most of the links will work on a PDF.
Great, that answers that question. And the CTLE, one last, any clarification on CTLE, Clotilde, they're asking? Or Xiomara?
Yes, I put my email in the chat just in case someone needs any clarification
Regarding CTLE?
regarding
Yes.
CTLE.
Okay, so
You
Yes.
can contact
You
Clotilde.
know, Clotilde, you can put it up again because some people.
Yeah, yeah, make sure that they know you for
Yeah,
CTLE, I'm
Clotilde,
sorry.
right. They might miss that.
I'm putting my email.
Okay, put in the email, it's good.
But also related to CTLE. So that they
Yeah.
know that's
Exactly.
right.
A lot of people already left, Clotilde, so.
I
they
have done it.
usually-
I have
they
done it
usually
before.
I know you put it before.
Yeah,
They
so-
usually contact Xiomara or Antoine, so don't worry so much about that.
Yeah, I'll forward it to you if they contact me. Clotilde, don't worry about it.
And also they, sometimes they say, they put CTLE at NYU. So either way.
No worries. They usually reach out to me directly and I will forward it.
Exactly.
Xiomara, there were about 20 people that left before the link for the.
The link was attached to the confirmation,
Yeah, but
Gloria.
some of them they don't understand that, but it doesn't matter.
Hi, Gloria. I'm sorry, can you, there's still people on, 65 people. Do you want to give a closing statement so they can all?
Clotilde, can you please send your email one more time?
Yeah, some people, it went, you know,
I
the
just-
chat, it goes really fast.
I just,
Hey, Gloria, I'm sorry.
Yeah, put it in, it already disappeared. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
did.
there she goes again.
Yeah.
Yes, it's there, it's there.
It's like 5 times that I have put it, so.
I know, but it just.
Either one, they should have gotten it.
Could we not worry about that so Gloria and Ron can make some closing statements and let people
Yes.
go?
Thank you.
Is Ron still here? Well,
Yes, Ron is still there.
Ron, you
I
want to
just
close?
wanted- I just wanted to thank everyone for coming this morning. It's, as I promised at the front end, it was going to be challenging and mind stretching. And certainly, I think your minds were stretched today. So hopefully, you will have stretched your minds and taken some of this stuff back to you and incorporated into your classrooms. And I look forward to seeing you on December 12th.
And me too, and you can write to me in between.
Yay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have
Thank you,
a
everybody.
wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the rest of this day.
Thank you so
Likewise,
much.
Nancy.
Very
Enjoy
important.
your
Wonderful
wonderful day.
Thanksgiving, holidays.
Everyone have a
you.
happy,
Happy
and healthy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Hey, Gloria, do you want us
Stay
to
away
stay?
from crowds.
Gloria, do you want us to stay back for a closing thing?
Our staff.
Our staff, yeah.
Well, Nancy, would you like to hear from the staff? Maybe.
Yes, why don't we, right now while it's fresh in people's minds, if there's something we can make better for next time.
Right.
Yeah,
I have
it's appropriate to have a debriefing now.
Yeah.
Antoine, you can stop recording now.
And Antoine, can you send me all the chats?